you wave? I have no idea how you wave. Okay, hi everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. Greetings. This is a first for me. Okay, if you can hear me, you can just wave in the chat room. Okay. This is supposed, I have a guest, or not a guest, but a guest host. And I don't know if I'm supposed to send them an invitation. According to the website, the Instagram website, it says I have to add them as a guest host. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So welcome, and just bear with me as I add the guest host. Okay. Are you able to hear me? Okay, I don't know if they're... If you can hear me, just say yes in the chat room. That will be a great help. Tap on the icon at the bottom of the screen. Yeah. Ah, there we go. Okay. I got it. Okay. And am I live now? I mean, yes, we can hear you. Good. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. As I said before, this is the first, and let's get started. No cuddling, just go right to it. There are many questions, and you sent me many of the questions from many of your followers. Well, actually, from all of your followers. I have no questions from anyone yet, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be intimidated. If you have questions, just post them. I don't know how this works, but if they appear on screen, I'll be able to see them. And Taylor says that, or Collage says that if you want to be heard or you want to speak your question, you can do so. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can request to join. Yeah, when they come in, they can. It just asks you like, do you want to request to join the live? So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my slideshow, I got all these images, but they're not appearing, so I'm not going to play around with that. Next time I'll have it together. All right. So continue now. I don't have access to, actually I do. Pardon me, I have it on the computer. I'm going to field those questions without touching this screen. Perfect. That screen's it's a little too much for me. It's a little small, okay. Should we start with the first question?
Yeah. Do you want me to sound them off, or do you just want to go in?
Yeah, go on. That's why you're on here too.
I'm about to say, yeah. All right. So for the first question, I was asking, when does the body finish maturing? What does it need as it matures, and when does it no longer need to be heterotrophic?
Okay, so multiple questions in one. When you're talking about maturation, are you speaking of the final formation of the so-called human or man? And that includes woman, for those who might be wondering. But as the order or the phyla, the species, man is inclusive of woman and child, obviously. So when does the maturing stop? According to science, when your skull bones are completely fused, and that occurs early on. Everything matures at different time spans or timing. Nothing all happens at the same time. And according to so-called popular science or so-called science, each gender matures. Now, you're using a word that some would call pregnant, meaning it can refer to physical maturation. It can refer to so-called developmental, mental, spiritual, emotional maturation. Your maturation, if we start in that realm, which is the first realm, before you start getting into the physical, let's start with the first realm, the unseen, the spiritual, the so-called mental. That maturation is ongoing, and with some, it's automatic. Some people mature as soon as they are able to speak and they are aware. That obviously is a so-called minority. Most mature in phases as they develop realization to their actions or their activities. Someone realizes that what they've done is egregious or harmful to themselves or someone else, and they learn from that. You've heard the term "learn from your mistakes." Well, in reality, that's just saying maturation, maturing. That development occurs over a period of time. It is claimed by various sources, schools of thought, like certain religious schools, that certain genders, let's say certain genders, the male gender matures at 14, the female gender matures at 12. That's one particular religion. I'm not going to name any because I'm not offending anyone. Some schools of thought say that maturation starts at 18 for the male, at 18 at 21 for the male, and 18 for the female. Again, you'll notice this disparity there with the genders, the maturation of the female first and the male second. And I'm not talking about physical yet. I didn't get to that yet. So what are we saying if there's not a compatible maturation in genders? What are we saying when there is a mix of maturation points or convergence points within the being, within the vessel? It's telling you that maturity is a phase, a series of phases. It's not one big step, like, you look at your dog, or you look at an animal, a so-called lower level animal. You can see the maturation as they go from, let's say, puppy to adolescent. Well, you can see that supposedly in man and in human too, but there's also the level of maturation of mentality. This applies basically to all life forms. Therefore, to answer that question, when does it start? It starts as soon as it is ready, as soon as you are ready to mature. And when does it stop? It stops as soon as you are, according to this world, able and ready to fend for yourself and protect yourself. That's your full maturation. Your body might mature first, but your mind's still waiting. So many people don't mature.
Yeah, I guess I was just avoiding the word development because I remember you were saying development is probably not the best word to be using, but I guess so that's like the more so the metaphysical end of maturing, but
it's all
as far as
encompassing.
the physical,
it's all encompassing. I first looked at the first thing, if you want to call that metaphysical, is, before you become a being, the old adage, the old idiom, you're a twinkle in your father's eye. What's that saying? That's saying that you're a thought. You're supposed to be a thought. Many people say that their children are accidents. Yeah, you're supposed to be planned. What is a plan? It's a thought. So before you become anything, your guides, your parents, your progenitors, they plan you. They're supposed to. But in this world where everything is becoming robotic and animalistic, people don't plan, they just do. And so there's no such thing as reproduction. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. That's what you mean as far as when people say when someone was conceived, it happens well before ejaculation.
Yes, definitely. And you're supposed to be preparing for that. Yeah, you should be, you and a female, you're male, a female is supposed to be preparing, and you're supposed to be preparing. These are all things that are not done in this world because you are being bred to be food, you're being bred to be an animal, you're being bred to be a slave. So all of the things that you're supposed to be doing, like, I don't use the word cultivating, but nurturing your life-giving properties, your sperm or your eggs, you're supposed to be doing that prior to you using them or commingling them. You don't just commingle them and you haven't prepared them. And you don't just mix them or mix with someone that is not prepared for this. most people are not prepared for it at all. And so that's why you plant your seed in hostile territory, or a woman releases her eggs to violent light or sperm, and then you get a world of chaos. You're supposed to plan before you do these things, and all of these distractions are stopping you from this. This is just one thing. There's so many, and we'll go into it in time, but there's just so many things that you have been distracted from. As far as the heterotrophic, if you look up, well, you know, hetero, obviously, binary or polar, hetero meaning different, complementary. Well, in the case of heterotroph or heterotrophic, when an organism produces its own food, you produce, if you want to call it your own food, when you ingest certain materials, whether those materials are light or air or minerals of some form, you convert them. You know, you make peptides when you digest things. You know, you were asking about trypsin on the phone earlier. So, you know, that is a form of something that you are using to convert something else, you know, an enzyme to turn something else. Isn't that basically converting in order to make food? Or are we going to take it to a macro level? If we take it to the macro level, then you never stop being that, because you don't produce your own food. You don't grow it. You become a scavenger, because if you're a meat eater, and it doesn't matter if you're a fruitarian or a vegan, you don't grow your stuff. You get it from someone else, and you blanketly trust. You don't know what's done to it. You just go with a label that says organic, and you trust that it is organic. You trust your governments, wherever you are, saying that our agencies have approved this food as organic. You don't know that. And if you're a meat eater, and I'm sure you got a lot of meat eater followers, I know you do, because I do, and this is not putting anyone down, I'm just saying you're a scavenger. True meat eater, whether part-time, full-time, and you have to go out and get your own meat. And you have to do it according to, there's the law. There's an actual law to this place, and nobody knows, the people do not know the laws. I'll go into it later on down the road on the laws of how to so-called hunt and how to put back into what you take from. When you do that, then you can supposedly consume that flesh. But the way you're doing it now, you're a vulture, you're a scavenger, you're a decomposer, and that's not what you're here for. So you're out of line, you're out of tune. You're in violation. You're not supposed to be a scavenger. Someone else kills it. They package it in styrofoam and plastic. It's bleeding. Most of that blood is dye and hormone. And then you take it home and do whatever you want to it. You doctor it up and for your tongue, and then you eat it. You are still in that same level of non-heterotrophic. You're not producing your own food. You're not hunting your own food. For vegans, you're not doing it either, unless you have your own farm or you have someone you trust that you go to. And you don't have to have your own farm. You can have a garden. You can, this is the whole concept of community. You work with one another and you grow your own food. You become a producer. These are things, if you're talking now about maturity, you should mature, not should, but you are obligated to mature into a producer. That's what you are supposedly, when you reproduce, you mature into the level of reproduction. So you become a producer. You are able to produce or reproduce offspring, reproduce your so-called self in a way, or reproduce the lineage that will reproduce yourself. That's a producer. You're supposed to mature into that. Well, how can you mature into a non-heterotroph if you are always in that level of, you know, baby needing pablum or baby needing milk? You never mature into that. You always stay in that framework, regardless of what you are. I'm not calling out anybody. I'm just saying everyone. Vegan, vegetarian, meat eater, pescatarian, you name it. All the same. You're scavengers. Everyone, we have become scavengers. I don't eat as much as most people. I eat a certain amount of times during a 7-day period, not week, 7-day period, and that's it. But it's not every 7 days. It's only a certain amount of time, and it's based on the laws and principles that were originally stated for us to be here so that we can thrive here. And that's what we're supposed to do. Otherwise, you become a machine, constantly defecating, constantly consuming. That's not you. That's not us. There are creatures that are made for that. You hear them in the summer. They're examples. When you hear them, the nonstop sound of the so-called forest, it's got to do that. It's got to decompose things. And it has a short lifespan because of that. But it's constantly replaced. You place yourself into that realm, you get treated as such. So now move
So
on. Went into that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so like when you're in a scavenger lifestyle, you're just gonna synchronize with other scavengers, and like if you are to uh, produce, if you can call it that, like if you are having a child and you are in the scavenger lifestyle, you're gonna just align with other scavengers and usher in more scavengers.
Yes, totally. And it's also the mentality of it. You know, you can come out first, you come out of it mentally or spiritually, and then from there you make the hard road, and it's not easy, the hard road to become interdependent. That's the hardest thing, to become interdependent with others. Distractions are not only distractions from what you're supposed to do while here, distractions are from others. You know, people claim, well, I got family. Okay, you got family, but even in families, people are distracted from family, and even within family, it's not true community. There's obviously minorities out there, the little pockets of people who are living what I'm saying, but that's obviously not the norm. That's the exception to the so-called rule. We're changing that though.
Truly. Well, what should a pregnant woman eat, or a woman that plans to get pregnant? What should she be eating prior to conception and through the gestation process? Is it what are the laws as far as that? Like, I know you were saying like you only eat during a 7 day period that you're picking, or however you're doing it, whatever, according to some law that I'm sure that you'll bestow upon us. But what would a is it different for a pregnant woman or a woman that plans to get pregnant?
Yeah, obviously. So you're talking now about the female of our species, if you will, and obviously they're closer to the realm of these senses, and therefore they're supposed to do certain things like, consume a little bit more and have more variety. Uh, Most males are not going to like this, but it's not about anyone's emotions. This is about fact and truth. The male so-called diet, or the male so-called meal style, is a modest one. It's not supposed to be all over the place. If you're eating like that, you're eating like a female. And you'll notice these things when you read certain books about the past, and when they're talking about warriors or braves or people who went out on missions. Obviously, these things might be a little exaggerated with hyperbole, but for the main purpose, if you were to look at what these men or young men in training ate, they had a very meager not subsistence, but you would call it just very basic. And that's how you are to eat when you eat, a very basic meal style. You shouldn't have all this stuff piled on your plate. And, if you're having a carb, then no more than 2 carbs on a plate. Don't mix things that don't match. Don't mix things that don't assimilate. The same for the female. The only difference is she can increase her variety, but she should be wise when she eats, just like you're supposed to be wise and nurture your sperm before you become a so-called parent, or think about becoming a parent or marriage or whatever. And the same with her eggs. She's supposed to start as soon as and females have eggs from the time that they arrive. So she's supposed to nurture those eggs with certain types of meal, but not only meals, but what she is around energetically, because within that egg goes the light, goes the life. And so from there, you now are manifesting creation within. You cannot be playing around like we're doing on this planet and have been doing for far too long. Hence the reason you're creating chaos. And I'm talking, when I say you, I'm talking to the females who are listening. You are manifesting chaos. You don't nurture eggs by eating the way you're eating and what you're eating. If you are about to become pregnant, then you first, before you start talking about what you are going to eat or what you need to eat, take stock or inventory of what you are doing right now and what you have been doing over the last 5 years, because that's going to affect the child. If you change up just because you got pregnant or are going to get pregnant within the year, doesn't mean anything. What you've been doing over the last 5 years is still affecting you. You have created a tintype of self, and that is going to be the tintype marker for that developing, the fetus that develops within you. So what you've done 5 years prior is going to make a difference. That means what? You might not, if you're wise and conscientious, you probably don't want to have that child right then and there. You're going to have to wait 5 years. There's no fast purge to undo. It's very important that you do these things with a man, and here now the men are going to like this because our bodies are made to change rapidly. So we don't have to wait 5 years to make a change. You see a slothful man, he's got too much estrogen. Pardon the noise in the background. He doesn't want to change, and that's a lot of males out there. Notice I said males, not men. Same for females. If you're a woman, there's a difference. There's a difference between a woman and a female and a man and a male. So when it comes to what she should eat, first take stock and inventory of what she's been eating for the last 5 years. If she's been nurturing herself over that time period, okay, now she can transition into certain foods and maintain those high folate levels in her food, dark fruits, eating the skins of fruits, staying away from certain types of cruciferous, and that's most vegetables are cruciferous, staying away from them because that's going to throw off her thyroid. And the thyroid is a crucial organ in the during the development, or pardon me, during the manifestation of life within. It's not actually the manifestation of life within, it is the growth of life within. It takes your mate to put that life inside you. So in order to maintain it and to nurture its growth, you don't want too much cruciferous, if any. Keep that to a minimum.
So how often does the template regenerate, and how long does it take to fully cleanse from from a bone deep level? 'Cause I've read online that sometimes it says, like, I guess you could answer for either one, but I've heard 7 years, 10 years from the bone to regenerate bone, and I know the blood is coming out of the
they all
bone.
regenerate at a particular rate, some faster than others. So reason why I mentioned the woman in a special light is because, especially if she's going to get pregnant or be impregnated, it's very important. It's very crucial that you have that 5 year period of nurturing. So you should be planning 5 years in advance before you say I'm going to impregnate, and stick to it. No playing around. If there's too much playing around, people play around. I mean, they don't get it. No one sees it. Couples pop out children as if they take more time to prepare a cake. And the whole concept of Planned Parenthood, that's really an egregious travesty, and so-called abortion clinics, but they call them reproductive health. How is murder reproductive? We're living in a time of lies, in your face lies. Reproduction is not murder. That's just a plain and simple. So what does that say? That means you're going to have to prepare, and there are certain things that you must do, starting with protecting self, being around in a community or communal situation where you are protected. You don't have to worry about certain things. You're wise. It's important to be wise. You don't just play with this thing they call sex. And there's a saying, if you play around with sex, the joke is on the offspring. Or the joke is the offspring.
So yeah, truly. So on the masculine side, or the male or men's side, there's some sort of seed cycle going on. I've listened to your podisode about it, but I know other people probably haven't heard it. So when a man is cycling, his seed is cycling and everything, and he's regenerating his seed. I guess what is the cycle length, and what is, like, because basically you could call, like, ejaculation kind of male abortion in a sense, right? Like if a man is just frivolously ejaculating, then it's kind of like the other end of the spectrum. Like you got women aborting, and then you have men ejaculating for pleasure.
I wouldn't compare the two because, but I get what you're saying, and there's residue and errors to both. For it's kind of like the difference between the death penalty and I guess abortion. You know, um, you're killing on either way. You're waiting till the person is an adult. You didn't do anything to make sure that they did not become a criminal, or maybe they were wrongly accused. Who knows? But you've got some system there that says we're going to put this person to death, and you got another system that says with impunity you can just frivolously get a so-called abortion if you don't want it, or whatever reason you can get an abortion. Now they claim these things are not the same because of so-called changes in laws. But that's going to change soon. That will go right back to it. But what's happening in these systems, these chaos systems, they want to introduce, and they are introducing other things like an omnibus of corruption, things that will be introduced in the new so-called reproductive system or laws will be any kind of abortion without question, regardless of age. Remote abortions, because you can do those too through medications or at a clinic. And what will also be introduced will be gender reassignment for children. So if a child, supposedly children can claim that they want reassignment, and so all that is necessary are hormones and counseling until the time that they're able to get their so-called reassignment surgery. This is all chaos. The child doesn't know what gender they are to be. They only know what programming they have received, and they only know what has been done to them in their biochemistry. And most people have been affected biochemically by the things that you see going around, the chaos around us. All the more reason to start nurturing yourself, especially your recreative aspects, your sex cells, your gonads, taking care of them. And if you're going to participate in the reproductive structure, yeah, you better, because what you're making is going to affect everyone. And I don't think a lot of people think about that. Your child is going to affect the world. Everyone's children is going to affect the world. It's not just this person in your family, in your home, in your neighborhood. Everyone is going to affect everyone. Therefore, if we start doing these things within the law, and I'm not talking about the law of man, I'm talking about the original law and responsibility and just common sense to a degree. Start doing this in communities as opposed to waiting for critical mass for this to happen. You'll see a change within your communities, and that's what's going to have to occur. You will separate from the masses, because otherwise you will get thrown in the mix with the masses. You won't be able to refuse. You won't be able to opt out. Hence the distractions from community.
Yeah, it's a incessant distraction. But when well, I remember you were saying that the procession of souls has stopped, and that people are just basically just having beings at this point. And I guess you could tell everybody when that happened, what that means, and if they're having a child, or should they even focus on that right now? Like, what should people as a whole focus on if that's the case? Because if the procession of souls has stopped, then what would you have a child for? Are you just having a child as a placeholder so that you can return, or why would you even do it?
That's a question that must be asked regardless of the astrology we are in. Regardless of that, that's a question that must be asked by all those who are considering so-called parenthood. Why are you doing this? Why are you ushering in this life form? Why? And you have to have concrete reasons, not some abstract reasons based on emotion or reasons based on what someone else said before you. You have to know what you're saying, why you're saying it. Before you get to that point, why are you having sex? Have you asked that question? Why are you having sex? Ask questions like you're asking me, like people, your followers have asked questions. Ask questions. Most don't ask questions, and then when they do, they don't want the answer. So ask questions. Ask these questions. Should we usher in children, or at this point in time? Look around you. Be honest. And if you say yes, okay, you got to be prepared for the consequences.
Regardless,
Regardless,
even if it was a so-called like golden era, it would still be ramifications
there's
of
always.
so so when you're having a child, like you said, it should be concrete logic, and like it shouldn't just be emotions leading. So when you're going through that process of having a child, are you attracting a being? And this is why I always figured that you had to be really in touch with your dreams so that you could commune with whatever being could potentially come through you and whoever your potential mate is. Like
Mhm.
you have to have like open discussion or dialogue with this being and have complete community, like clear communication with them through the dreams before you just bring them in mechanically.
You mean a mate?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, definitely the mate. But I mean, like as far as like who the being is that is coming through the two of you, you should have already been communing with them consciously through dreams before you give them, the pass to come in through your body.
And that starts usually around the so-called age of 14, 15. And you don't see that in my people. They don't even do it any longer, but moons ago we did it, and it was part of the maturity process. I don't know what some groups call it, rites of passage. This wasn't a rite, this wasn't a ritual, but it was part of the maturation process. You started off, um, I'll use a quote someone once said: everyone is a potential, I think you said it, everyone is a potential father, everyone is a potential mother. And that's fact. Regardless of your potential to have children biologically, meaning that, if you have some type of dysfunction, the potential is there for those who are, naturally male, naturally female. The potential is there. So shouldn't we be treating each other as potential fathers, potential mothers? I didn't say mates, but I mean like potential parents. This person can be someone's mother. This person can be someone's father. Therefore, they should be receiving from their guides, their parents, their guardians, training, not just training on, okay, this is how you take care of a household, this is how you balance a budget. Yes, that too, but how you are to nurture the life before you start to take it to the physical. What do you see in a child that you want to produce? What do you see? What does our community need? Okay, we need people who are wise. We need people who can solve problems fast. Okay, so you start nurturing this within. And then when you come to that point where it's now time to put it together, you know exactly what's going to happen because you have manifested in reality beforehand. People do, I said it before, I said it earlier. Most people who don't realize this and they think about it for a second, they put more emphasis in making a recipe.
Truly. So when, as far as the originals, the original people, and I guess you could say the original state of being, when there was harmony on Earth, or a period where there is harmony on Earth, what would be the goal of unifying and as far as like bringing in children or ushering in beings, and as far as polygamy is concerned, um, it was that the norm to be polygamous because everybody was more so selfless, and they were like, we need, as a community, we need a being that can only come through the matching of these two vessels, whereas these other two vessels can only produce this type of being, so we have to do something else to create what we need or to usher in what we need. Is
Well,
that Was that the logic?
yeah, you kind of answered your question there. So-called polygamy has occurred over time, periods of time, so-called time, where there were wars and you had a disproportionate number of one gender over another. And then there, of course, is polygamy based on contract and the distribution of land and wealth for that purpose. And then, of course, there's that, what you mentioned, the logic of like the garden, where you have weak seed, weak egg, fertile seed, destructive egg, destructive seed. You want to weed out certain things that you don't want to see in the future. Therefore, you're going to mix and match certain things. What does that imply? That means you had matchmakers, if you want to call them that. And certain groups to this day, smaller groups, they know who they are, probably some listening, they have matchmakers. You can go to certain parts of New York and they have matchmakers. People pay them to match so that they will have a particular type of mate. And they look into things like family structure, blood history, and then they give you the courting ritual. And during that courting ritual, you get to find your particular suitor amongst the candidates that are based on the structure that you should mate with. That's typical, but it's also reminiscent of what you were just talking about, where you wanted to breed out certain things that should not exist. Psychopathy shouldn't exist, but no one looks for that because you're distracted into thinking breeding should take place, randomly, haphazardly, and you get what you get. That should not be. A lot of things should not be, but we allow them to exist because we don't use intelligence when mating.
Because it should be about functionality.
Not only functionality, but if you truly care for this life form that you're ushering in, you don't want them to come forward with, let's say, spina bifida. People say, I didn't know, it just happened. No, nothing just happens. You did not take time to look into what's in you or what's in your mate and their bloodline history. So you find out, okay, now they claim, okay, that this is where the so-called modern science comes in, like the rescuer. Oh, we have ways we can test it. And of course, they put a hefty price on it, so the average person can't afford to get those types of tests. And they say, we're here to rescue you from all that. No, they're not here to rescue, no more than any government is here to help you. What is being done is to usher in a sort of Arianism, and that's not even accurate, where now we can annihilate a lot of different things. And who makes the list? We make the list of the things that should be annihilated. No, not talking about them, and they should never be part of the equation. Asking questions doesn't take a lot. Investigating someone's history doesn't take a lot. Getting a blood test doesn't take a lot. And I'm not talking about free clinic STD blood tests, although that's important too. I mean finding out the blood, the alleles that are in the person's blood. And you can get that done. Is it worth it? Like, oh, I don't have it. Well, wait, you want to usher in a life, but you're not willing to pay $50, $75, $150? You don't deserve to have anything. You're still maturing. You haven't matured to the point. That's a big problem. Most people are not mature enough to handle what it truly means to be part of the reproductive creation or manifestation grid. You don't just participate in it, although you can do it because you have the parts, but it doesn't mean that you should be doing it or that you're ready to do it.
Yeah, and I remember, like, I was reading a book, and it was just talking about basically everybody at this stage in the game. Well, not everybody. A lot of people are already basically just retarded polygamists. Because they have all these different baby mothers and baby fathers, and it's just not working together. It's a bunch of like unconscious polygamy anyway. But if you approach somebody and consciously want to do things in a conscious way, then people want you to lie to them almost. They want you to say like, no, sell me a fairy tale, even though you're probably going to lie to me, and then go be with some other woman or some other man, and then do whatever you was going to do anyway. And so it's like polygamy is already here, but people are just lying to themselves. I feel like.
Do you think that's polygamy? I don't think so. I think it's a perversion of polygamy.
Yeah.
because, you know, inside of polygamy, the actual word itself, you know, you listen to the sound of endogamy, and in an endogamy, you have a unity, and you have basically a looking out for certain interests. Uh, you can claim that, I'll use this as an example, not a metaphor. The males of Skull and Bones society, that's an endogamy. They look out for one another. They'll kill for one another. You belong to that. That's an endogamy. Russian critic Julian Kristeva called them a homosexual endogamy, but she wasn't meaning in the sense of homosexual as the homosexual who calls himself gay. No, not that. She used the term only because it meant that they only interact with each other. They've made like a bond, a blood bond, where they do for, they're beyond the Masons, beyond any secret society. That's what they do. That would be considered an endogamy. Well, within a polygamy, which is like an endogamy, you don't allow your offspring to be hurt. You don't allow your offspring to go hungry. You take care of every single one that is part of your seed line. That's polygamy. So what you see today, you know, someone having a child here and having a child there, that's not polygamy, that's a perversion. No, you cannot compare the two. Within polygamy, there's a contract. You know, there are rights to birthrights, and there's a structure to the polygamy, to the polygamous order. And because it's a contract, it's entered into by conscious, willing adults. They know exactly what they're getting into. So some receive nothing, but they know that what they want to get out of this is either the union or the companionship and the protection only. They receive nothing insofar as the so-called birthright or the so-called contractual obligations that might come with it. That's true polygamy. Anything else is a joke and a perversion. So they can't call it that. That's why most so-called laws don't allow it, because most people are not ready for it. They're not mature enough for it. And who's made them that way? The very systems that block them are the very systems that have weakened everyone because we participated in it like some kind of drug. So the very systems that say no polygamy are the very systems that have created the weakness and the lack of understanding. There are people who claim they're polygamous, but that too is a joke. The closest to it you might find would be in Mormonism and in some Hasidic groups, but that's about it. That's the closest, and that's not even really that close. So if you want to see what polygamy looks like, you have to look at those groups. You could look at those groups.
So, like we were talking about the other day, you were saying that some people are here as fertilizer for everyone else, and I made the analogy kind of like a tree, like an apple tree. Not every tree not every apple that falls from the tree is going to make another tree. It's there to fertilize the soil and help, you know, I guess the whole situation. So it's the same thing for people, and you were also saying that, yeah, people that just go ahead and pick the fruits too, like haphazardly, and just take anything that they're given. They're eating some of those fruits were designed to be fertilizer and not to be consumed. They were designed for, you know, bugs, fungus,
Exactly.
and stuff like that.
A little thing that you know, from traveling this realm, I pick up information, knowledge, and every place obviously has its growing patterns, growing seasons. And I talk to all the various gardeners, farmers. You know, many people know so much, and it's wonderful to talk to them. And one thing to realize that not, as you just said, you know, you used apples as an example, but all fruit, regardless of what type of fruit or anything that fruits, has its own timing. And during a particular timing, I know, for example, I have helped people who have grown pear orchards and pear trees. At a particular time, you don't touch those pears, and that could be 5 years. You just don't touch, and they're growing and blossoming and looking very tempting, but you don't touch them, and you don't even eat them. Some people are to that point because they know exactly what the law is. They don't even eat them. They let them fall and sit there. The only thing that might try to eat them will be some crows, you know, and that's a scavenger. Those are dirty birds. That's what they're doing, what they're here to do. They take the excess and then they defecate it out someplace else. The acid coat comes off, and that pear tree can grow someplace else. So they are part of the equation. But someone who comes along and, as you said, without the maturity, without the knowledge, because they refuse to get that knowledge and goes and picks it and eats it, they're violating the timing factor. And not that's just an example, an egregious example, but guess what? It happens every day through our industrial farms. No one, that's why you read these articles, you can go and look it up now. The topsoil has been depleted. We're now at the level of artificial topsoils. So getting nutrition, true nutrients, is very difficult. And why is there the depletion of topsoil? Because no one is following the law. There's a law to planting. There's a time when things have to be stopped, when things go into you go into a fasting mode. Fasting means you stop. You have to purge, you have to cleanse, you have to rest. The land has to rest. Just like there's a time when in the world of trade, there's a time of so-called jubilee. It's not for some so-called queen. I don't call them queens, I call them another word, but I won't use it here out of respect. But those are not royals. The jubilee is for the people. It's a forgiveness of debt. It's like the use of alfalfa or some other thing on the land as a cover crop. It's so that you can rest and recuperate. You have been working all this time, and so, okay, there's a recovery time now. And you know, whatever you've paid back, that's it. And there's a forgiving of that. So everyone gets a fresh start while here. Think about it. If this occurred within particular time phrases or time phases, imagine what you can start accomplishing, because you're not distracted by all these encumbrances.
Kind of like, what would you do if you had unlimited resources? Would you do the right thing still, or would you
Probably not, because most people are indoctrinated. And you can change the word resources to the word time. If you were told, okay, you got 1,000 years. Okay, now what are you going to do? Are you going to continue in this process? Or are you going to realize, okay, that doesn't mean anything. I still must do what is supposed to be done. And now I'm going to annihilate all the distractions, like someone annihilates all the foods, so-called foods that they have been consuming, that have been destroying them and bogging them down and making them hosts for countless types of parasites, ethereal and physical, for a long time. You'd be surprised when you look at yourself in a true mirror and see what you really look like.
All that you're carrying, and I guess that's all that's all in the blood at this point. Like, in people's bloodlines have been pretty much a host bloodline.
Yeah, you can say that too. You know, parasites do travel on bloodline.
So when it comes to people being fertilizer, because you were saying that most people will not I guess realize themselves in their lifetime and really do the due diligence to study themselves and study life itself. So when, like, as far as like the amount of people that survive these cataclysms that seem to happen cyclically, is there any number, like, people? Because I remember you were saying if 10,000 people were consciously fasting in unison, they could change the world. But like when the cataclysms come and the cycle, when life gets cleansed like that, and a bunch of people just get used as fertilizer to support the few that survive, who is there a number of people that will survive? Is it the 144,000, or is that just another number that really is arbitrary?
There's never just another number. When it comes to numbers, you should get that out of your head. Numbers are never just another number. Numbers, pardon, I'm going to borrow somebody's catchphrase. Numbers matter. So be wary of how you think of numbers. All numbers matter. Look at Truth 4444. Okay? They didn't just pick that name randomly, or maybe they did, but you have to wonder, how were they influenced to do so? Numbers are no joke, obviously so, and they're used to manipulate a lot of different things in this aspect, or in this place that we consider reality. So no, there's no such thing as just a random number or an accidental number. 144,000 is used for who knows what purpose, but is that the number of a remnant? A remnant is a remnant. If I tear something off of a piece of cloth, I got a remnant. I don't know how big it's going to be. It depends on the rip. It depends on where that fabric is weakest and where it's strongest. So you'll get a certain number. That's a remnant. And if anything you've learned from observation, whether myth, tale, so-called fact, so-called history, what you have learned, what you have gleaned from all the things that you read, heard, is that there's always a remnant. There's no huge mass. There's always a remnant. From the story of so-called Noah to the tales of Herculaneum and Pompeii, there's always a remnant.
Yeah. I know that there's not like no numbers are just numbers for no reason, but I just didn't know if the 144,000 was um, something that's just there as distraction or if it was an actual thing that somebody's drawing some truth from. Because I know, like when it comes to the body and numbers in general with the body, like every part of the body is like the whole body, like the amount of bones in the hands, like both the most like it's like there's geometry with the bones in the hands, right? Like I mean the numbers with the bones in the hands is like
Well, look at
um
someone just typed in there. Pardon me. I did not realize that they were typing in the chat room for all this time, but someone just typed in there about 72,000 and what it equals, the equivalent. These are very poignant points. So yes, the numbers and the number system. I put that on the website numerology, and I actually have a source that scans books because there are a lot of books that are not scanned, and it's so easy to get these books scanned these days. There are certain books in numerology that I want to get scanned and put up on the website. My source at literally my source at a particular, I was about to say where, but I won't. They are no longer there. That particular source, they have retired, but they had access to many different books that I have put on there, and we'll put on there. They're heavy. They're like 200 megabyte books, but no worries. These are books and inculabras that come out of ancient texts, and many of them are in Old Latin and other languages. So it behooves everyone to either learn Latin and start studying numerology, just for the heck of it, in addition to other things like gardening, like permaculture. You have the capacity for learning a lot and absorbing more. You have been handicapped deliberately. You see someone who has the penchant for supposedly physics, and then you don't. So you have been taught, oh well, that's just how it works. That's, you're dumb, they're smart. No, when it comes to brain and brains, you've either been traumatized in the so-called womb, and before then, through lack of nurturance, and therefore you have now these missing points or pockets in your capacity for acquisition of knowledge and information. And then that develops into an emotional state where now it's associated with like food and taste. I just don't like it. So just the mere mention of numbers, and you develop anything from a rash to obliviousness. You just close it out, tune it out. You're gonna have to work on annihilating that.
and that gets passed down. That's what people call heredity, right? Like if somebody says like they can't do something or um somebody has a destructive thought that they are attached to, and that destructive thought leads to them having destructive behavior. It's going to affect the genetics to where it becomes hereditary in a sense, right?
It,
If you say you can't do math, then you're
it,
gonna you're gonna
most,
be a wanderer.
okay. Well, most of these so-called genetic pass downs or hereditary uh, uh, lineages or effects, genetic effects, are actually cues and markers that are acquired through behavior patterns. So a parent, through behavior and cues, can teach a child to hate math. not necessarily something hereditary. They're not passing that down. But what you can supposedly pass down is what you have lacked. You certain things become vestigial, and the vestigial part occurs on the so-called chromosome. That's where it starts. And when something is either, think about a circuit board, or if you can imagine your computer motherboard, and you have buses, you can toggle things off and toggle things on. If you pass that board down and switch it or swap it into another computer, now it has things that won't work. They're still there, the parts are still there, but certain things are just not going to be functional. Or you can have ports left open. So now this new computer is vulnerable to certain types of attacks, like most Windows machines, because they've got 1,000,001 openings in their deliberate openings. So that's what occurs within these people, within people maybe yourself, and that you have openings within you that you had no clue are there, and these openings lead to habits, lead to weaknesses, lack of desire for certain, let's say, the opposite gender. So you have all of these markers and occurrences that the person has no clue that they have as a result of the progenitors, people that came before them. Hence the reason why it's so important to be mature and to plan before you start making.
So as far as planning into the near future, or for the distant future, um, when is the biometric taking over the total, like pretty much the total takeover of the biometrics and the AI grid? How far out are we from that? Because I know we were talking before about the digital currency, the currency going digital in a few years, if that. I guess just how far away are we from the next reset?
Well, you've already experienced the so-called reset. You're within it. A reset is just it's just a fancy word for restructuring or reconstruction or renaissance. If you notice, it's a false history, but read it anyway. Renaissance did not take place in a year, like boom, and then it started. It took place over a period of time, and during that time, various takeovers occurred, incremental. That's how parasites work best, incrementally. And they work best getting you to violate yourself.
Incrementally, right?
Right. That's the best way. The old adage about the slow boiling frog.
Yeah, what doesn't kill you is just taking its time.
Yeah, well, obviously, and it's not just supposed to kill you. These systems of control, they're supposed to marinate you, basically.
To tenderize the meat, basically.
Mm-hmm. And you can look at that in the figurative sense and the literal sense.
So we have a man-made or a man-induced reset that we're in now, but like when does it reach that threshold to where there will be some sort of flood or some type of cataclysm where you have like plasma raining down or something like that?
You're looking for the major destruction. The major destruction occurs when the remnant moves out the way. That's why I keep saying for folks, everyone is tied into the God grid. I talked about the God grid many podosodes ago. The God grid is an overlay, literally an overlay. You can call it an electromagnetic RF type overlay over a grid, over a grid, over a grid. In this instance, the God grid would be just what it sounds like. An immersion into a system that requires your participation because you are in it. And for example, this internet that we're using right now, you probably can kiss that goodbye in a few years when it's part augment, part virtual. And just like digital converters for your televisions, how you saw how fast that occurred, but it was incremental. And then, of course, you couldn't use an analog TV. You had to have a converter, and then, of course, after the converter, it was in place within the machine. Those machines were sitting in warehouses already. So most of these things are sitting in warehouses and mainly in places where they can sit, and it's not new. The area that is known as China, that's an old testing ground. That's been, the original autonomous zone. One of the original autonomous zones was there, the Shang region, Zhangguo region, or Zhang region. That was the region where none of this took place. If you want to talk about harmony, and then of course when it fell, when it was invaded, most of the people and remnant came, as I told you before in the private conversation, they came to North America, to the Americas, and others spread to, small portions spread to other areas of so-called Europe, so-called Eurasia. They spread there, but primarily came to North America. In addition to their groups came other groups, which would be considered oppressors. And you had a lot of warring factions going on in the Americas. But in any case, in those regions of Asia, you've got vast wildernesses, desolate places that are ancient, and then they don't want you seeing and they don't want you finding, because if you saw them, your jaw would drop. A, they show highly advanced technological cultures were there. B, they disprove a lot about what you see. You're given this painted reality, and it's all false. But D, did I get the C? No, I'm still A, B, C. Okay, I'm at C. C, they're also used to house a lot of things, from technologies that will be used. They put warehouses out there. It's easy to put warehouses out there. You can use those 40 foot or 20-foot containers, metal containers, and then you just put them on trucks, take them to ships, and send them around the world. So regardless of what the technology is, most of it is already made, and it will be introduced. And the thing is, will you accept it? Most people accept it, like cell phones and any other type of technology. You have to stop this. And you're reaching that point where you're going to have to unplug from all this. That's the reason why the communities, because there will have to be a pullout. And therefore, if you pull out from it or unplug from it, how will you communicate with those of like minds, with kindred souls? You're going to have a nearness. You're going to have to be right there with them, or have some type of communication format where you can reach out to other communities that are spread around the planet.
Because I mean, is there always how does the remnant survive? Like, is it just like, I guess, is the Noah situation a parable? I mean, I know there's.
How do you survive when your vessel is under attack? I'm just saying or explaining your vessel in motion. When there is a so-called ailment or so-called disease within a body or vessel, there is a remnant form or formatting in order to save the entire vessel, or is it saving the vessel so that the remnant can now live and then procreate and then spread forth what should have been in the first place?
So, how did it go down? Like, I guess the questions that I have are, who are the Tartars and who are the Moors, and what did they do in the Americas?
Okay, now we're getting into the so-called history and the thing. We went from the body politic to the politic. Okay.
Yeah.
Moor or Moorish or Moors, that's a blanket term. It was used to encompass a group or a diverse group of people who did not call themselves that, for the most part. You don't find any writings of so-called Moors where they refer to themselves as that. Others refer to them as that, no different than you might see today. Some groups, they shun the popular name given to them, because every man and woman is supposed to select their own destiny and not allow someone else to name you Well, Moor is not a name that the people called Moors selected for themselves, but throughout.
It's like Dravidian. It's like Dravidian isn't what they call themselves.
Right.
What people call
So,
it. Yeah.
but if you go with the so-called history, then you're going to go with those names. These were families, and one of the things of these groups, so-called Moors, had as a unifying thread was their familial structure, in that they knew exactly what their bloodline, who their bloodlines were, and they practiced these things to a degree that was on the scale beyond what you see in the so-called royals today, which are not royals; those are perversions. And why? Because these families basically held within their families a lot of wealth, and you could classify them as so-called royals. They would be considered Edomites, um, and so they would be of the line of dukedoms and dukes and so-called duchesses, literally. So when they intermarried or intermingled, they did so with purpose and knowledge. It wasn't
It was
until,
methodical.
yeah, I mean, yeah, beyond methodical. And that's how they had strong empire wherever they were. I gave you that one name that was very, very large family, uh, Garamantes, and you can trace their lineage into the mulattification of Portugal. Most of these names have been restructured that you won't even recognize who's who or what's what. And for example, Joe King, you might find someone who thinks their name is Joseph King or Joe King. You trace it back, it's actually Joaquin.
Or it's like I remember you were telling me Cohen is just another word for con, like con.
Right, Khankonnin, Canaanite. Right.
So that's how they hide. That's how but they still are like leaving enough remnant there for each other to communicate and know who's who.
Not necessarily. These things all occurred after so-called resets. So most of these folks are an amalgamation of or perversion of many different groups, and you don't really see that methodological, or pardon me, methodology in grouping. You don't see that today. You might see some parts of it in certain religions. You definitely don't see it in Islam, unless you're talking a higher level. There's no caliphate, for example. That doesn't exist.
The word.
Well, I mean, not only the word, but the system. It doesn't exist. There once was a caliphate, and it stretched across this realm. An empire stretches across the realm, and that's what people don't realize. You hear them say, "Oh, the U.S. is an empire." No, it's not. It's a nation within an empire structure. And the key thing is for those who are astute to find out, okay, where is the empire? Where does the empire central location? Who is the head of the empire?
So yeah, who controls the high level slaves that people call royals, or the clones, whatever you want to call them? Those people that are in control of like the Knesset or things like that. People that control the money, like who's controlling these people? Like who is the shadow people that control the empire? Because obviously they wouldn't want to be known, right?
Well, considering the venue that we're on, I suggest we stick with, and this is not out of any fear, but just, for time and for purpose. We can talk about this on a different, um, whatever this is, podisode, podcast, Instagram, at a different time and location. It's all about timing. I think that, when it comes to knowledge, it's no different than what you are ingesting in the physical sense through your mouth. Your plate should only take on what you want, what you require, and no more. Once you start going into beyond, then that's overindulgence. Take it
And
slow and
you
make
eat things
notes.
and things are eaten in an order. You're not eating things just like I'm gonna have this before my entree or whatever, however you look at it. I'm not having appetizers last, just
Right.
as a basic example. So
Yeah, when it
I
comes to
guess so.
these so-called potentates and these individuals that are in your face, meaning they're showcased. Obviously, if someone is showcased and you know their name, you may not be able to reach out and touch them. That's the whole purpose of being showcased. You get to stay away from everyone else, limos, helicopters, whatever, penthouses. You don't have to be near the dredges of the world, the regular us. But obviously, there's a pecking order, obviously so. And in that pecking order, you have those who are egg and sperm born and those who are just egg born.
So you're saying that people that had an embryo fertilized by something foreign that isn't a sperm.
Or, as you said earlier, clones. That's not you're taught in movies to think of certain things as fictional and unreal. And that's the whole purpose of entertainment. Entertainment is the fourth or fifth estate when it comes to military, when it comes to government. It is the perfect tool to engineer the minds of masses. So you have to be very careful of what you allow in. It too is ingestion of so-called information, visual, audio, and a whole bunch more. Now, in digital, we can slip in a whole lot. You can slip in things that can actually manipulate your structure. So you got to be careful of what comes into you, and especially in the form of entertainment. They're telling you right there, entertainment. I look at it as intercontamination. So be careful of that because it will take your natural way of thinking, the way you have been structured or built by design, and and toy with it and pervert it. And what I mean by that is even more than I'm sure your listeners have heard this before. What you see is what you get when it comes to your actual visual response system, when it comes to your processing of knowledge or information rather. What you see is what you get. So if you see murder in a movie, then you get murder. You visualize the trauma, you sense the trauma, you are taking it on, you are building more, you're actually calcifying yourself when you do these things. So if you see something that is presented as fiction, well, you see it as fiction. And if you see it as fiction enough times, when you see something in so-called reality, then you're going to doubt it or you're going to think of it as fiction. Or you're just going to be confused. That's one of the main things, parasitic behavior is to confuse the host.
I guess I'm asking like about the different people in the process of the last reset, or because I know it's really there's no separation in things in the sense that like everything is everything, and the body is not. Yeah, the politics of the body is not really different from I guess the politics of history, and
No, it's different. It's definitely different. We're not, these things are not the same, and we, none of us are the same. We're to utilize our, our experience, our reality to teach, to observe. So if you ever get overwhelmed, you can look at yourself, look at how you operate. Hence the reason it's so important to know how you operate and look at yourself as an example. Or if you want to look at so-called nature as examples, these are teaching tools to help you readily grasp what's going on around you. In this world, things can become very convoluted quickly. Do not allow that to intimidate you. That's one of the things that is a parasitic tool, to convolute things to the point where you become fearful, and when you get so fearful, you don't make a move. You don't do anything. You just comply. So be wary of that. That most of the time parasites in nature are not as big as they seem. They are full of some type of sequacious fluid. They're full of water or liquid, and the real thing is tiny. So don't
like a
allow
tick.
that to affect you. Hence the reason it is important, in numbers. I keep saying community, and I'll say it up until a time when it's no longer viable to say it, but I'll keep saying it, community, and start building on it now. Don't allow these distractions to stop you from doing it. That's the
I
hardest
mean,
part.
I'm just relating the body to the history because there's always a threshold point, like we were saying the other day, that you start you reach a point where your body's like, okay, no more, I have to fast. And if you ignore that, then eventually the body starts to break down, and if you ignore those signals, then the body just completely breaks. And I know you were saying like the remnant has to get out of the way. So I was just, I guess, trying to shed light on when the cycle is coming back around, or what the indicators are that the remnant has done that. Because I guess, like you're saying, if the remnant is entrenched in the grid, this artificial motherboard that's on top of the organic motherboard, I guess, if they're entrenched in that, then the the day of judgment can't really come because there's too much interference there. It's like it doesn't, you can't. It's almost like an autoimmune response where the body doesn't really know what to attack because the good is next to the evil or wicked or whatever.
You're missing something. What occurs when you get to that point within a so-called body? You get catastrophe. That could be heart attack, heart failure, kidney failure. You get organ. That's a catastrophe. That's the equivalent of a major catastrophe, tsunami, flood, all things going on at once.
So yeah, I guess that's what I was asking is as far as like what are the signals when there's a heart attack, or when the remnant, when people know that okay, the remnant knows that the jig is up and that things are they're just going to get out of the way. What does that look like?
It looks like what you're seeing now. If you don't see this as chaos, you've blinded yourself. This is chaos.
But I know it could get worse than this.
Obviously so. But do you want it to? I mean, you're already to the point of worse. You want it to get worse so that you can say, okay, now it's time.
I mean, for the critical mass, I mean, like for people to really realize, I feel like a lot of people are so.
Don't look for
Um,
critical masses. That is what I mentioned earlier. This whole, that's a distraction in itself. That's kind of like and I don't use metaphors, but that would be like a metaphorical Jesus. The critical mass is the savior. The number becomes the savior. So if everyone wakes up and comes together, it will be the saving grace. That's like you're looking for a savior. That doesn't happen.
I don't think. I think as if people, I was thinking like if people woke up, then the parasite is just gonna go into total. It's already pretty much total destruction, but go into a whole nother mode
When has
of
that ever
attack.
happened? When has that ever happened? It has not. That's what I said. Look to your old tales and myths and whatever myths and whatever you want to call it. Look to them and be wise in reading them so that you don't get suckered in. But notice a definite thread. There's always a remnant factor, and it has nothing to do with the large sum of everyone. You would be contradicting everything that you just said earlier regarding, you said if the masses are so-called masses are considered compost or fertilizer for the rest, it's not that you're compost or fertilizer for the rest. It's that when you violate self and become it, and we're going into a geometry right now because we're going into a square or a circle, coming right into what I said started with. When you violate what you are supposed to be, what you are, what you have been designed to be, by indulging in actions and activities that go against the law, such as acting as a scavenger, a decomposer, then you're in violation. And that says right there, what shall become of you? You go with the flow. You go with the rest of the things that get mashed into one big lump sum.
So what? How much time do people have to build a community? Because it's obviously it seems like we're on some sort of clock or some sort of
It's all about
number
timing,
situation.
not time, about timing. And therefore, you go forth and you do it, you start, and you maintain a maturity meaning wise in all steps and all things. And I told you this before in private. when you called me. I said about the community you had reached out to people about starting in that area or in some area. And I said, have you done the mature thing and the wise thing, which is get the groundwork laid out? You're going into the realm, and the realm is within an empire. So within the empire, what paperwork protections are you going to set up? Within each community, you have to have what I would call, it's not a witch, but a sorcerer. That would be a lawyer, or someone who has a legal mind, who can navigate in those realms easily, from UCC to civil code, and knows it well, to contracts, in order to set up a trust, so that the trust is irrevocable and that it's in no one's name, and so no one can step forth like a Dathan and say, you're setting this up for your family and we're all just fodder. No, because it won't be that, and there will be nothing like that. The community is literally community. The so-called property is communal property. No one can own it, and no one from outside can come in and take it. So have you set up, you're in an empire, you're not going anywhere. The purpose is not to try to destroy the empire. That's for the creator, originator, or originator creator to do. And obviously, if you're truly wise, you realize that the originator creator has set up all these things that you call devil and this and that for a reason and a purpose, and they're still here. Look at when I mentioned earlier, I talked about racism. Racism is here. Forget live and well, it's being practiced. Many of the listeners are racists, okay? So, and I'm sure most of the people who don't want racism have tried to pray it away, but it's still here. So what does that tell you? The ills that you see, like the ugliness of nature that no one wants to look at, things that decompose feces, the things that decompose the trash you throw out. No one wants to look at that, but it's there. The smell you smell when something is rotted, that's nature. And it has to be here for a purpose. So would you consider that the devil of nature?
No, like you said, I guess everything has its purpose and it has its sanctioned period where I guess racism runs rampant and everything is just happening because it's some sort of signal being communicated.
It's not only that, but it's part of the balance, in the sense of, okay, when you are within the law and the scope of the law, these things fall back. They do not exist. They fall back. But when you are entrenched in it, when you are marbled in it, well, these things are going to proliferate. Now you want to see what, when I said about looking to yourself, for example, in order to make sense of what is being played out before you or carried out in front of you. When you look to yourself and you look to, for example, infestation, gut infestation, or depletion of microbiota as a result of antibiotics or some type of drug. And then, of course, now you got a proliferation of maybe candida, and you want to get that to change. You're going to have to take yourself out the equation, that mix, and all the things that you are indulging in, you have to cease. And for at least a week or two, you have to cease eating.
Okay, that kind of brings me to one of the questions that people ask me. They're like, what is the point when you are like, what are the signals that you should break a fast, or if you should just make it your lifestyle?
Well, you want to call it a fast, or you want to call it how you stay within the realm of existence here, and the truth of existence, which is you don't indulge all the time. Obviously, that should be obvious, but obviously it's not. Therefore, you participate and then you do not participate. Eating is participant activity, and you don't do that all the time. Otherwise, you defecate all the time. But do you defecate all the time? No, you don't want to be defecating all the time, and most people are spending a lot of time in the toilet, or actually not, because most are constipated. However, that's as a result of constant indulgence. And no one sees it. You see, go to Facebook, you see food all over the place. There's food channels everywhere on so-called YouTube and everywhere else. Food, food, food. Come on, you gotta see this. You cannot blind yourself any longer. There literally is no excuse. And for those listening this evening, this morning, this whatever the time is, wherever you are, so-called time, there's no going back.
Once you know, you can't unknow.
That and literally, you're now responsible for it to make changes. You don't have to, as I mentioned before. The choice is yours.
So another question I get asked a lot is it? And people ask me, they ask me if it's okay to be with a meat eater, but I get even more than that. I get, is it okay to be with someone
What do you mean by
that has?
you have to be specific? We're in a time where there's no need for metaphors and we're adults. So,
I guess. All right. Yeah.
you
Okay. So people were asking me. I guess I'm gonna just take it where I would equate it to. Like people want to know if they can have sex with meat eaters and if they can have sex with people that got the jab.
okay, think about that for a minute. I want everybody to just
I
think.
know. I mean, I'm just gonna let you go in. I already understand, but I feel like I'm not gonna get out your way.
Okay, so just using so-called common sense. When you are with someone, and that's actually, I'll go into later down the road. I also teach the language of true knowledge. And you don't want to say with because with is against. So if you're with someone, eventually you're going to be fighting with them. With is against. It's not, a word that you want to use, but let's just use that word for now. When you are with someone, when you are carnally with someone, you are sharing what they have within them. That's one of the reasons why you're with them. You're with someone because you want to share what they have within them. You're looking at it from the abstract point only. But there's a part of you, big part of you, that not only wants to share the abstract, you want to share everything. That includes them, their perspiration, their saline, their serums, everything you're going to be sharing, including the lipase and the amylase that comes from their saliva. And if you are with someone who has been inoculated or vaccinated or jabbed, then now you are ingesting their spike proteins, at least their peptides, and that now is making you weaker. It doesn't give you anything, but it makes you weaker. So now you are being set up for future so-called infections. But they are definitely, it's really messed up. I have talked to so many people, and if you haven't seen the degradation in folks that have received these things, you're blinding yourself. I've seen, and you can see, it's easy to spot.
Yeah.
The
So
same goes with a so-called meat eater, someone who's eating of the flesh. Obviously, that's a scavenger. You heard me earlier about scavenger. They did not hunt the meat or the animal. They did not skin it. They did not do anything. They just found it on the shelf and they paid for it. And they don't know how old it was. They know it's red and sanguine looking. It doesn't smell foul, but actually it does. It is foul, and more than likely you can use certain hormones and even something like saltpeter, which is an old-fashioned way of doing it, and you can preserve a dead carcass of an animal for a long period of time. You can freeze it and defrost it. You can soak it in tomato solution and then rinse it. You can add so many different things to it and then of course red dye, and then it looks fresh. You get the maggots out. They do this all the time. They take it in the back. Ask some of your local people. They're not going to tell you, but you want to talk so-called Illuminati? Your Illuminati is right there in your supermarket. And I'm being facetious. They're not Illuminati, but their activities are secretive like that, where they're there serving up meat, putting it in display cases, but they're taught and told by management, don't do this, don't do that, don't say this, don't say that, and by no means allow anybody back here. Because if you saw what's going on back there with the so-called meat that you've been eating, well, you'll still eat it. So it doesn't mean anything. And therefore, when you are with someone in the so-called biblical sense, you are literally ingesting not only the liquids and the juices, you're also ingesting the so-called energies that come with it, the vapid juices. The vapid juices are the worst. There's the violent juices that come from the pancreas in these animals because they were murdered, but there's also the vapid juices. That's the dumbness that you get from the hormones that are injected into the feed. They want vapid animals. A vapid animal is an animal that doesn't put up a fight and produces, goes to slaughter, and you are introducing that into yourself. So in other words, you're making yourself stupid. Look up vapid, and then go online and look up vapid hormones and vapid chemicals that they give to animals, meat animals, animals for consumption. They also do that to animals that are captive in zoos too. It's like a distemper shot, or worse, because it plays with the animal's natural capacity for instinct. So it's going to mess with yours. So you end up with this person who might be a great individual, nice soul, but they are dumbing themselves, and you are dumbing yourself. Doesn't matter, female or male, you are still receiving the juices. And if you are if you're playing around with the reproductive grid, then you're even going beyond that. You are now taking, if you're female, you're taking on his sperm, his vapid sperm. And if you're male, you're taking on her vaginal juices. And you're just taking, and everything, you cannot separate this thing that's a vessel. Everything you put in the mouth goes everywhere. It doesn't go into you, but it is absorbed through villi, through your alvein and your alimentary. These are canals. Food doesn't go into you. It goes into your pipe grid. It goes into your canal. If it went in you, you'd be dead, because that stuff is highly toxic that you call food. It goes into your canals, and then we break it down in order to turn it into peptides, into enzymes and things of that nature, into proteins, so that we can use it for particular purposes, such as stronger dreams, recall, new skin, rebuilding, or for the 7-year renewal period, and all these things. But if you're not getting it, you're creating a template, or not even a template, you're creating a mold that will be a corrupted mold, a cracked mold, and that will be the mold that will be repeated each time you renew. And it gets worse and worse and worse and worse over time. So you are repeating yourself in a cracked mold that gets worse as a result of what you put into you. And if you're into the meat eating, so-called meat eating, you really are into a cracked mold. And if you're with a meat eater, same thing goes for you. Check out meat eaters and see how fast they age.
Yeah. So for people that got the shot, I remember you were saying that there's going to be most likely a mass die-off of, especially of males, and then there will be this major disproportion of the sexes, male and female. There'll be so many more women than men that they'll be more willing to get artificial insemination to
Yeah,
fulfill their
you didn't do your
motherhood.
chess game, Taylor, or collage, pardon me. You didn't do your chess play. If you were playing your game right, you would have looked into 1968, 1975, and that's when these so-called, they had it before then, but sperm banks. And so sperm banks were popping up here and there, and they're here still, but you didn't realize what they were there for. They weren't, what do you think they were there for? Ugly females and spinsters? No. They were set up for now, for this purpose. And so you have, but they won't be available to just everybody, obviously. And the disproportionate number has not, it's not natural. There's always been more males than females. People don't realize that. But with so-called wars, and then of course, more males die in the quote unquote arriving process, so-called birth process, supposedly, but that's usually in hospitals, not in natural birth situations, in hospitals. And then of course now, not now, but over the last 68 years, you've had a high introduction of plastics into, actually 70 years, because plastics were introduced around 70, 75 years ago. And with the introduction of mass-produced plastics into the aquifer, you now have estrogen mimickers, and that affects everything. I mean, you were asking earlier about how when so-called wickedness spread. It affected the water, it affected everything. Well, that's what any kind of hormone will do. And estrogen is very volatile, and it has infected the water supply, the groundwater rather, and all micro plants, where we get a lot of ground nutrients. And people think they're safe with mushrooms. Nope, mushrooms have a lot of estrogens in them too. As a result, that is going to cause a lot of homosexuality, a lot of anti-sexuality, or just males who don't want any kind of sex, and females too. They're just like not interested in any kind of procreation. Homosexuality includes both so-called male and female. I'm not just singling anyone out. So all these names that people give themselves, that's just cute. Try to hide themselves from reality. Whether you call yourself lesbian, whether you call yourself gay, it's still considered homosexual, or if you want to use the scientific reality, it would be anti-sexual, because two males, two females together is basically just masturbation. It's not sex. It's not going to lead to a procreation or reproductive action. So therefore, you would just call it masturbation. And you're going to have a large number in the population, and that would mean no productivity. So you don't really need to have pathogens and disease to wipe out males, although this current so-called disease, it targeted Aboriginal males, and you can look up the statistics on it. Even though they won't focus in on them, they will say, oh, it's attacking women, it's attacking this group and that group. But the largest number that has been attacked by this bioagent, have been Aboriginal males. And then, of course, all other groups included, not just Aboriginals, but anyone that falls into a melanated category. That includes many so-called Latinos, that includes many so-called Arabs, many so-called East Indians. So it was basically attacking a lot of melanated people. And then, of course, all others who fall in there who don't consider themselves or don't know that they are melanated, who are walking around calling themselves so-called white, it started affecting them too, which was the case. There's no accidents in these things. There's no residuals, there's no side effects. These are targets. And obviously, the first target would be male. We don't want you reproducing. So if you eliminate a certain number of males in the world population, who are the females going to mate with? There's nobody to mate with. And they're not going to go to sperm banks, as I said before. Sperm banks are for a particular purpose, for a particular reason.
Orphan trains, basically, or what people would say when they look up the orphan trains and they say like, oh, everything got repopulated after the reset. They use these sperm banks for that.
You got it. And it doesn't take much to put all these things together and connect and see these are repeat activities. There's nothing new. I'm not saying anything that's new. These are repeat activities. Parasites have to have you repeating your behavior. And again, look to your body, look to your vessel rather, and see how things behave, see how things are. Parasitic activity requires recidivist behavior. Need you eating the same thing, and even when you think through so-called volition that you've made a change, better check it out. You're probably eating something that they have put on the menu. You just think it's different. Most of the stuff that falls on the vegan spectrum is parasite food. Or, pardon me, parasite approved, like Kix, the cereal.
Yeah. From what my research brought me to, it was telling me that the biggest surrogate market and the biggest sperm donor market is in Ukraine,
Mm.
and so it would go along with what you're saying as far as the parasite, which is pretty much non-human or non-man. It's a totally separate entity itself that is just occupying the species, right? So
Yeah.
it's trying to create as many hosts as possible, and it knows that if it has a certain type of genetic structure running rampant throughout the realm, then it has a lot of vehicles to operate from and to try to proliferate through and to try to impregnate people with and however it can use those vessels to spread. So it would make sense that would make use those areas as the surrogate grounds in a sense where um, like you were saying, a lot of this stuff was done in a lab. A lot of this stuff is not. When people think back about grafting humans and stuff, and they think about Yakub or stuff like that, it's not something that's done unscientifically. It was done meticulously, and they know that like the Scythian bloodline or the what the Rh negative bloodline would be the more open vessel that would be easier to control through vanity and just through sensual pleasure because there's missing pieces in the blood,
Very,
and
very.
that's Ukraine, and that's Ukraine,
Yeah,
right?
that's very accurate. Very accurately put. There's much more there than meets the eye, and I suggest that if you are an avid reader, you get off the web for one, or if you're going to use the web, use PDF books and make sure that they haven't been redacted or changed or altered. Many books have been changed so that the information is now approved and sanctioned, or you're not going to get the actual truth. So don't look, for example, books that are like Howard Zinn type books. The re-education of education. He is basically giving you vomit and saying that it's truth. You look at, I'll use him as an example. He in the so-called Second War, and he killed people as a bomber, and then all of a sudden he has an epiphany. Well, that wouldn't that be reason enough to not trust what this person says, especially when they are telling you that this is the fact of history? Well, you don't have to even go that far. Most of the information that comes from these sources, whether it's historians or uh, researchers, look at where they are from and the lands that they stand on. They are normally and more than likely second, third generation immigrant. So they're not standing on their own homeland. And they won't admit to that. Or even if they do admit to that, they don't admit to their participation in a crime. And they don't see it as such. So they're very jingoistic about their approach. Therefore, how can what they're telling you about so-called history be fact or true? You have to extrapolate from what you read and be able to, like picking pepperonis off of a pizza before you eat it. And I'm not saying eating pizza, I'm just using it as an example, so that you can get to the Alps, whatever, if that's all you had to eat. But in reality, you wouldn't want to touch that pizza at all. And what you would do is use it as what? Observation. To see who made it, where it comes from, what it's in, not to go and use it as your sustenance. Same goes for any information or knowledge that you get from these sources. It's very difficult to find information on history, so-called history, right now, because most of it is put on the internet, but that is uh, bought and paid for. You're going to have to go to libraries, and unfortunately, the reference sections of libraries also have been pilfered and now are under guard. You can't even get into, unless you have a university library card, you can probably get into those reference libraries. Or if you have a friend who's a student, or if you have a friend who's a professor who's open to what we're discussing, then yeah, take advantage of that. A wise advantage, responsible advantage, and go in there and read, make copies for others and yourself, and get this knowledge and information so that you can take out from there, because it is being disappeared fast and made inaccessible. As I mentioned at the top, my source at a particular large institution has retired, so I don't have access to a lot of materials that that they used to scan for me.
So when it comes to people being not when people are out of place and not where they're supposed to be, I remember you were telling me that Africa was a place that was not for humans, and I've looked online and I've heard things like that the original Aryans were the Black Irish, and that's who came to the northern Mediterranean and and I guess started to inhabit there. But I don't know if that's the case. I just know that we were just saying that every part of the world has its place for certain things, and Africa was not for humans, maybe to travel through, but not to live on.
Well, if you go with the Noah flood story and progeny of Noah and the land contracts that came out of it, the Hamite, Shemite, Japhethite. Well, the Hamite was the first to violate, even in the so-called union, not union, but family scenario of Ham and his brothers and father and mother. Wasn't Ham the first to violate a certain
The
rule?
curse.
Right. So, what was the violation? And you have a lot of different schools of thought, trying to analyze, okay, well, obviously if you go with the indoctrination teaches you that, oh, we're dealing in people who wore loincloths and hunter gatherer. That's a lie. But that's the image that has been programmed into everyone to think, when you think ancient, think, people with staves walking around with long beards. I'm sure people have long beards. I'm sure they walked around with staves. But you're dealing in a world that probably looked better than the world you're in today without all the crap and more modern, more advanced. But you're taught to think otherwise. You're indoctrinated to think otherwise. So if you want to think of Noah, don't think of that terms. Think of it in that light. Maybe think of it in another light and then go beyond what you have been told or what has been perpetrated upon you in religious books. They tell you the basic story is supposedly that, I'll keep it quick, I'll make it quick, that Ham saw his father's nakedness. You need to do some reading into the words and the words used, and whether in both Paleo Hebrew and in English. A nakedness referred to vulnerability of one's spouse. So that meant Ham effed his mom while his dad was drunk. And so what comes out of that is a curse, the offspring of that.
So that would be Mizraim, Canaan.
Well, they said cursed be Canaan,
Yeah, because was he the firstborn?
one of them. And from Canaanites came all those groups that you mentioned.
So yeah,
And
I guess
so-called Moors to this day, or at least those under the Moorish Science Temple, they lay claim to the line that comes from that. They say that they're, part Shemite, but they also say that they are from the line of a group of people who have to admit to incest as their progenitor.
like Noble Drew Ali says the house of Canaan, right?
Well, that, and if you look at it, they're from the daughters of Lot, or pardon me, his brother, not Lot. Uh, well, actually, yeah, the daughters of Lot, who allegedly, or according to the story, not allegedly, but according to the story, that they allowed fear and programming to, fear of doom and gloom and Alex Jones, that the world was ending, and so therefore they said, okay, we have to procreate, and they slept with they got their father drunk, and they impregnated themselves on his sperm. And so that's where many groups claim their claim to fame is from, the daughters of Lot. That's some claim to fame.
So these are the people. A lot of these folks are the people that inhabited, because with the Mizraim is Ham's son and Phut is Ham's son, and that's
Egypt.
the Nile Valley. Yeah, that's Egypt down to Ethiopia, right? Is it
Well, that's Cush. The actual
Kush? Kush.
Egypt, yeah, the actual Egypt that they're never going to tell you about existed in Asia, and it doesn't take much to, many moons ago, I visited a museum that, I'll just say it's on a campus of an Ivy League, and they had many exhibits there before they removed them. And I had a certain type of experience in one of these places. This is before any kind of digital photography, way before anything like that. And the thing that I noticed, and I used to sketch about the statues, was that they all had Asiatic features. And then years, moons later, you don't see those Asiatic, you don't see as many, you see very, very few. But at that time, almost all of the statues had Asiatic features, what you would call like a slant eye, what you call like a Khoisan appearance. You don't see that anymore. And these were statues that were coming out of not only so-called Egypt, but also Asia. They won't tell you this. Most of the statues that you consider Egyptoid or Egyptian, they were found in so-called Asia.
So was it like an empire that spanned the realm?
That was Upper Egypt.
China.
That was Upper Egypt, and that's why you had the fall of the Shang Empire, not Shang Empire, but the Shang Autonomous Zone. That's what it was. Autonomous Zone is basically the end game because it's where communities get together and they don't participate in any of this stuff that's going on. Literally none of it. No monetary systems, none of the food, none of the water, and it is respected, but you have to protect that. And if you notice through time, anytime Aboriginals claim to have set up towns or cities to get away from the invader species, they were always either chased out or burned. That's because they did not do it the way that, according to the law. And I don't, you know what I mean when I say the law. They did not do it according to the law. Many of them were attempting to copy off of what they saw being done around them. And of course, that is a sign of a failure in itself. But this autonomous zone was not like that up to a point. And then when they fell, like a body falls or a vessel falls, it's as a result of what it does to itself. It's, you know, the breaches it makes, its own self-violation.
So when it comes to America and the Mississippi being the Nile, was it because it was all one landmass?
No, that is not even proven. And people will claim that and they'll give it names. They'll say, I forget what, or Pangea or something like that. That is a name that came out within the last 100 years or so. And it supposedly comes from a Greek name of Gaia or something. This is not proven, but what is proven are major catastrophes in various regions. And you know, when I say major catastrophes, I mean beyond what you have seen this day, where land masses have fallen or have become consumed by water or consumed by earth and dust and mud.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
we're in the point, we're in the day and age of arrogance where we think this is it, this is the brightest, this is the best. The land is settled like a house has settled, and there's no, you know, any shaking going on. There's just a little here and there, and all of that major catastrophe stuff is all behind us. That is the epitome of arrogance and stupidity.
well, it can't transform into something else until people acknowledge it and then move from the reality. I mean, they have to they have to dwell in reality to be able to progress from the situation at hand.
And
And if
that
people
means
never will.
witnessing the truth, experiencing the truth, and being unafraid of what you see, and realizing, you know, when you look within and when you look outside, you accept what you see and realize what you must do. You don't become intimidated. You don't become, those are all emotional states. You don't become fearful. You don't become helpless in that you say, okay, I cannot do anymore. I cannot do this. I cannot do anything. Therefore, I'm either going to do one of two things: just shut up, close up, and not do anything here where I'm at, or I'm going to participate, and that's it. Most people choose to participate. And I've had many call me, these are participants, call me and ask in the heat of a moment because they were fearful of losing their jobs. How can I opt out of this, you know, this needle? How can I get out of that? You know, my job says I got to get it. How do I opt out of it? Can you write me a letter? Is there a church nearby? What can I do? You know, what can I say to these folks other than, why would you wait to this point? You see what's going on. You see the incremental happenings right around you, in front of you, now happening to you. What more do you want? And this is not a fearful thing. This is just, you can call it natural. If something is going on, again, looking at the vessel, you see what's going on with your vessel, but yet you're not taking the steps to change that. You're not changing the thought pattern. You're not changing the so-called mental or spirit pattern. And then you're not doing what it takes physically. Oh, I can't afford to do it. If you can afford to become corrupt, then you can afford to uncorrupt yourself and cleanse yourself. And not just cleanse yourself and cleanse your bowels. I mean cleanse yourself in the spiritual sense and the soul sense.
Not just mechanically.
Right.
Because like we were saying, we were talking privately about, like, saying that the remnant is in jeopardy of possibly being wiped out, or wiped out largely. So when whenever there's a Babel Tower situation, or a point where everything gets wiped again, um, where to, like, you want to know yourself as much as possible while you're alive, so that when something like that happens, that you can still retain yourself, because you know that your core of your being, I
What
guess.
do you think that entails? What do you think that requires? Let's see if
Like
you.
you were saying, before, like, people have to go through experiencing community, and experiencing holistic living to the max, to where that could be embedded in their blood, and then that can, I guess, live within them in a particle level,
Okay.
where, like, the etheric part has it like a soft drive, almost like the body's like a hard drive, I guess, and
You can
then
say that.
you have like a
The
backup. It's like
California Creole says, please do more of these lives. We need your voices. Well, thank you and appreciate that. This gentleman is an example of what we have been talking about insofar as preparation and literally working towards community. And I've witnessed how he's, you know, um, progressed, not changed, but progressed is the difference between change and progress. And where he, I'm not going to mention where, but he situated himself because of that fact where he could and can establish community. So we have to do the exact same things. We have to situate ourselves, which might mean moving. And, if you can't do it alone, working together. The major thing about these distracting cycles is to not only separate you from you so that you don't even see you, and you're just talking about being a remnant when you leave here where you don't even know you and knowing yourself. Well, you don't know yourself because you don't trust yourself, because you cannot trust anyone else when it comes time to trust. You don't even know what trust means. So that's why people find it very difficult to work with anyone else, especially when it means commingling funds, or when it means setting up trust. I say, because you're in an empire, and because that lack of trust exists, and it's like an umbrella over everything, then be wise and read and get over your mental pain and anguish of knowing and learning. Be a fast read. If you have poor vision, have someone read for you, or get some glasses or a magnifying glass. Reading is one of the most important things. It trumps television anytime, any day. Get it off of the black screen, the boxes, all of those things. Get out of them. Use them for what they're worth. And like today, what we're doing, use them. Use this thing for what it's worth. Taylor and I are using this box, but we're not worshiping it. We're using it because time is of the essence. So therefore, we're using it for what it's worth, this box. Use the box to read PDFs and literally educate yourself on the things that count. I counsel many different people, and I'll use another example. A person had asked me, what do I learn? And I asked them, what do you want to learn, and what can you contribute to a community if you were to be part of a community? And this person said something of the effect of breath work. And I said, okay. Can a community live off of breath work? Well, answer to that is probably, but in reality, you know that that's not going to happen because most people
Not
haven't
practical.
done the work to get to that point.
It's not practical, like for the most part. Like if that's all you can bring to the table, that's not practical in a community. You have to be able to apply. Like I feel like breath work is just a means to clearing the vessel out and realizing what you have to do, so you can create the space to learn how to be practical and apply knowledge.
Right. So, if that person is listening now, are you getting it? Are you gaining the knowledge right now? What you have to do first and foremost, and I haven't said this publicly yet, but I'm saying it now. Your emotions are like your children that never grow up. They're a paradox. They grow up, then they revert back to childhood. They go back and forth, back and forth. But the difference is you can have mature children and you can have immature children. And since they're your children, I don't want to be bothered with them. I tell this to anyone, keep your emotions over there. And when we're doing things of negotiation, when we're doing things of so-called building, put your emotions in a room with crayons, and I'll do mine with the same thing, and just let them sit there until we're done, because emotions have no place in what we're doing right now. They will stop you. So if you're fearful of increasing your knowledge, and many people are, then because maybe they feel that their sources of finance are not going to get them where they have to be. Okay, well, consider what's happening right now in this empire, in this realm. It's going into the so-called ethereal phase, what you call technological phase. Anyone and everyone who's making a so-called positive income is either a coder, an app builder, software developer, and there are now so-called schools which you can go to for free, like, what is it, Microverse? They supposedly will pay for your school and won't charge you until you get a job. Well, okay, if you can't afford to learn coding, which you can learn coding on your own. I have coding books on the website, and they're free. You can learn Python, JavaScript, JavaScripting, everything that you need to learn on your own. It just takes discipline. You can learn physics on your own. You can learn histology of cell structure on your own. You can learn anything on your own. I didn't say do anything like, perform surgery on your own, although you can do that too. But in a practical sense, you can learn whatever your brain puts its mind to. Does that sound strange? Whatever your brain puts its mind to, you can do and achieve. It hurts only because you have been taught that it hurts. Your brain doesn't hurt. You're not going through any kind of brain trauma. The hurt is called lazy and complacence. And complacence is in the muscles. It is in the kidneys. It infests the nephrons of your kidneys. Complacency. That's the whole purpose of it. That's one of the reasons for alcohol. Alcohol's purpose is to make you lazy. I know my people it was done to my people. It made the brave so-called warrior lazy. Sit back and watch his women get raped and watch his children get slaughtered because he wanted alcohol and just sat back and got lazy. And you see this to this day, alcohol. So watch what you put in yourself and know what you put in yourself so that you don't become a victim to your own violation, and that you'll be ready to take on knowledge. That's the first and foremost thing about everything that has been said and spoken this evening, is your acquisition and absorption of knowledge that you are going to have to use now and in I guess in perpetuity, but for now especially. And so-called practical knowledge, useful knowledge is important. Self-defense, things that you can do with hands, so you have hand-brain coordination going on. Everyone should have some type of skill that they can do with their hands, whether it's sewing, putting together pipes or plumbing, carpentry, working on bike motors, car motors, building, straw bale, earth bag, mud, adobe, all of the various types of earthen buildings that you can build without having to go to Home Depot or beg to get. You can use sources. Even the so-called earth ships, the people who are, made it a trendy, yuppie, hipster crap thing that you find out in Arizona, those folks are just a joke. But you can copy off of what you see there. They learned how to build things with glass and bottles and stuff, and you can put them down all you want, but they have set up some kind of community there. One man has set up a community. Although it's an elitist community, and I don't know how it works, I wouldn't recommend going there. But you can do the same thing, but not that kind of structure in the sense of the mindset that's there. We can all do the same thing. And we are doing the same thing. And start first with, as we started earlier today, when Taylor asked me the question that someone had posed, and I said, you start with, what should a person eat? And I said, you start with what comes first. The so-called thought, spirit, which is the program, the mind, and then you go to the physical. The means what? Start knowing, learning, reading, absorbing. If you don't like to read, I'm sure there are some videos out there that you can watch that will train. Take the time to do that. Also start learning some other languages. I would say take on no more than 2 within a year, one at a time. Spanish, Mandarin, if you don't want to do that, and if you are the scholarly type, if you want to be the scholar in the community, Latin, Hebrew, German, English, Old English. Start learning these languages, because if you're the scholar in the group, or scholars, you need no more than 3 scholars in your community. Then you're going to have to learn these languages and know them. And then, of course, you need the sorcerer, or AKA lawyer or paralegal. You don't have to be a lawyer, but you can be a paralegal or have a legal mind, or a lawyer mind, rather.
So people were asking, okay. I'm saying, like, people were asking me, because I mean, for this to all unfold, for people to like connect with themselves enough so where they can connect with other people, they're gonna have to get in touch with their dreams. So people were asking me like how they can protect their dreams, and if there's any, like, what is the function of lucid dreaming, and what is the function or purpose of astral projection, or is that something they shouldn't even be concerned with?
Right now, if you want to concern yourself with it, then you should set yourself up with a schedule, because that's going to take some time. You don't get into those avenues or those venues without serious discipline. And it doesn't clash with what I just said, but it will detract from what I said, and well, from the time that you're going to use for that. If you've got that kind of mindset where you're going to be doing all these things within a time span of 9 hours in a day or 8 hours in a day, I don't know what you're doing. If you got it like that, if anybody listening is, the trust fund set, multi-billionaire, millionaire, whatever, so all you have is free time, okay, fine. But then again, you should also be helping in the participation of this. But if you've got it like that, okay, fine. Take that time to do your exploration, but be real and truth about it. Don't be some jackbutt who is just dallying in it, like a lot of the so-called Westerner. And I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just saying that's the term used, the Westerner. That applies across racial categories. Westerners are looked down upon because they take on such things as yoga, and they don't have any understanding of what it comes from or where it comes from, or they take on whatever and it's a fad. So are you taking on astral projection because it's a fad? Are you taking on lucid dreaming because it's a fad? Or are you willing to go in depth and master it? If not, then don't even bother. What's the purpose of lucid dreaming? You should ask yourself, what's the purpose of digestion? And then when you can make the connection there, and you should, if you're actually thinking, then you'll realize what it is.
Because
dream protection, you can start with watch what you put into your face, or meaning your eyes and your ears. And mouth.
Okay, and is there any way that people need to sleep, or is there anything that they can do to their body, like oils or anything?
No, I've taught them this if they listen to those podosodes, and many others have said this before. I call it a clean room. It should be a clean room. So-called, you know it as sleeping, but I call it re-energizing, and a few others do too. They've realized they don't call it sleep. Sleep is for the so-called dead, um, and rest is for the dead. That's why I call it laid to rest, rest in peace. All right. So you are energizing, which is literally what you're doing. You are re-energizing. You let your phone re-energize. You plug it in, and it's re-energizing from some source. What are you doing? And you worship that thing. We're on this thing. I don't worship the thing. If it breaks, it breaks. But I use it for what it's worth. It's a communication tool for now, but I have ways to go beyond this, as you know, and you're supposed to be able to do that too. So this thing is a handicapping continuous tense, handicapping device.
So what does taking photos do? I know I don't know if we've spoken about that before. I've spoken to you about it in the past, but for everybody listening, what do photos do? Like in uploading photos onto these digital platforms, what is that doing? And does that affect people in the dreamscape? Because I feel like couldn't your likeness be taken and used in the dreams?
Well, beyond dreams, you mentioned several things there. You're talking about the God grid. The God grid is intertwined with all that we're doing now. Even what we're speaking is going into the God grid. That's why I'm talking in certain ways and certain words, because I'm not trying to feed the beast. Um, and that's what will occur. So you have to be careful with all these things. When you start putting your imagery, you asked about the biometrics. Well, putting your face on there, putting your imagery, people putting their children on there, you're all scanned in. You're into the God grid. And so therefore, it's kind of like when you pray to the virtual God, it can answer your prayers and know exactly everything about you, and like a Santa Claus, and grant you your whatever you've been praying for, or make you think you're getting your wish come true. And I'm just being sarcastic there, but it's actually real. When you put all of that into a so-called digital pocket, where do you think it's going? And why do you think it's going there? This whole acting as if life is you're four and life is sandbox, you need to stop it right now, everyone, and be mature. Start maturing. You don't toy around with anything, and everything you do is important, including your photos or your imagery or your likeness and your signatures and all that other stuff. You don't just unless you're vain, and most people are vain. That too has been prophesized. Lovers of self.
So
Ask yourself,
we
what's
should
the purpose of your photo? If there's a purpose, a legit purpose for your so-called image or likeness to be in a particular digital environment or place or space, okay. But what's the legit purpose? If there's no legit purpose, it's all vanity.
so the like how many years do we have? Because people at this point should be using social media to their to whatever benefit they can use it, like as far as like connecting with people or
That's all it's
like
for.
mind.
That's all you should be using it for. Connection, making connections, and from there going forward, knowledge share, and then taking it to the tertiary level when it's necessary and when it is beneficial for the purpose of the community or the community you're starting. Other than that, don't participate in the vanity. And most people get caught up in the vanity, the recipes, the memes, the jokes, the this, the that, the argument. You're feeding into your emotions. It feeds your emotions. Something that makes you feel good, gets you off, whatever. You're just feeding into emotions. That's why I said be careful of them. I don't disrespect emotions. You should respect them. They're very powerful. But at the same time, if they're not nurtured and trained, they will rule you and ruin you.
I looked at it like the emotion should be more so the reinforcement. Like you're leading with the logic or the awareness, and the emotions are reinforcement. They're not supposed to be the leaders.
Well, you can call it that. And so-called emotions are basically part of your biochemical grid, and they manifest themselves through your actions. And they can take part in the interpretation of what you receive, often blinding you to, calling it a delusion, uh, or a fit of some other type of emotion like anger. You are now literally being ruled and allowing your so-called emotions or chemicals, hormones, to interpret for you. The only time a so-called emotion should act as an interpreter are in certain circumstances, such as the sex act. And during that time, there's a reason for it. It's to communicate through the actual sex cells. They're highly volatile to emotions. And that's one of the main times that emotions are to play a part. Any other time, put them away. It's no different. And then what does that say then? Then you shouldn't be playing around with your sex cells.
Yeah, I remember you were saying it's just for pretty much just for sex, and if a loved one die or passes on, then
That, exactly. Then
that's the only.
emotions, right? And hence the reason why many groups, many cultures had mourners who were there to emote loudly and obviously, because these certain sounds would do certain things, and that was the reason. Others took it to the level of vanity. The more mourners you had, the more important the important you look to the group. But as time goes by, again and again, we see a lot of perversions.
So, how much time do people really have? Because like you were saying, like this form of internet is going to be done for in like probably, I don't know, 700 days, 1,000 days or something, and then it'll be an augmented virtual reality type situation where
Well, what
you'll
do you
need to
think?
have.
The person claiming, who they claim is called Mark Zuckerberg, what do you think they're all sitting on? Not just him, but many other outlets. And why do you think Facebook is still Facebook and not Metaverse, but Metaverse is in the background? What do you think's going on? There are programmers that work with these groups, or coders that work with these companies, and all of their projects are in the works at least 10 years in advance, because they work in teams, and they are tested not for the purpose of perfection for the end user or consumer, but for perfection in the data harvesting end and the
That's what
algorithm end.
that's what it's all about. I mean, as much as the Matrix is I guess maybe not the best metaphor. It's true as far as like turning people completely into batteries because all the parasite is using you for is an energy source. So it's just trying to get people like jacked into the metaverse to where people are just completely manipulated in real time by the information that their body's giving the metaverse, and then they just become devices that
Okay.
are controlled by devices.
Okay, so you know this. Now I ask again, what are you doing about it? I'm saying to you, here are the things to do. So once that stops, you've already been told and advised what you should be doing, and the choice is yours. Always has been. So you take it from there. And when it comes to so-called time frame, it's not about time, it's timing. Timing. The procreative act is about timing. Think about it. And so is the ending act.
Everything has to be in alignment, right? Like your body, you want to reach it when your body's in a a healthy state or whatever, and it's in a healthy template, and everything else has to be in alignment with it. And I guess if that alignment never occurs, then you just don't procreate, right?
Well, timing. Timing.
That's what timing. That kind of what timing is, right? It's pretty much alignment, right? Whether it's the stars or whatever it is, it's kind of like whether it's spring, it's some sort of alignment, like with
So think.
yeah.
You're getting to your answer to your question. Think
I mean,
that
I'm just asking as far as like how many years we got left, like as far as what people's concept of time is currently. I would say
before I answer
okay.
that, heated watermelon is extremely healthy in the sense of a purgative, fiber-rich fruit. And if you eat the seeds, you can get certain nutrients from them. If you eat at least, well, you have to eat all the seeds if you're going to eat one watermelon, one melon, or melon, or sandia. You're going to have to eat all of the seeds within it, especially now, and literally all of them. Don't waste any. You shouldn't have a lot of albino seeds in there. If you do, then that is a borderline hybrid. Your seeds should all be dark, and they should be active. You can tell an active seed when you bite into it. They've been, most of the industrial farmer growers, they deactivate, radiate, as per USDA, especially in the so-called US or North America, including Canada too, and now lately Mexico as well. So you get deactivated seeds and grapes and apples and other seeded fruit, and it's the joke, the big joke played on the people. I'm like, oh, if this is seeded, so I'm cool, but you're getting deactivated seeds. So be careful of that. And you can tell when you bite into a deactivated seed. It just tastes, it's dry. It tastes dead. You can sense it. So if you're going to eat watermelon, eat it all, seeds included. Do not consume more than one melon in a week. One is all you need. So go ahead. What's your question?
I was gonna say that we're reaching this phase here in the chain of events where it's going into the cannibalistic stage, right? I mean, like before, I guess at one point you had Scythians riding across the steppe on horses, and they were eating people, I guess, and then now it's just like a different form of that where people are gonna get fed the meat through the supposed plant-based meats. But I feel like as far as the desperation goes in this current circumstance, like there's gonna actually be periods I feel like where people will go into eating other people. I don't think we're that many years out from that being more of a possibility.
Are you shocked by what you just said? You just mentioned about an hour ago about some people getting a so-called jab and others eating so-called meat and wondering if the two shouldn't be together. Well, think for a second. You're welcome. Did you take the time to contemplate or research what's going up in you? I mean, you could think of a so-called jab as a penis that keeps on giving. You're putting something in you, and you're never going to give so-called birth. This thing is going to be in you forever and into your bloodline, and you don't even know what it is, and it's coming from companies that have been, proliferated with legal litigation, sued, in other words, class action, privates, you name it. I'm not going to mention any names, but you know who they are. Go and look these up online. I say go duck it or consult the duck, like in DuckDuckGo as opposed to Google, and research each company and just type in the word litigation, and you'll get tons and tons and tons of actual either cases or news reports or whatever on all of the manufacturers. So why would you just allow and then beyond that, have you researched what this thing is for, what a so-called shot is for, and how these things do not work? Shots are for animals, literally. That's one. Shots are second for emergency triage situations where there is basically a very dangerous situation where the life of the so-called patient is at risk, and they require immediate interjection or injection of something such as adrenaline, epinephrine. They need it quickly to start the heart. Other than that, you're not supposed to be injected with anything. You have natural response systems, natural trigger systems, natural receptor systems. You have barrier systems. You're not supposed to breach those, and you willingly allow yourself to be breached. You have a mouth that is there to receive. You have your skin is not supposed to be, if you get punctured, that's called trauma. You get cut, laceration, bruised, bit by an insect. Those are not natural, although they can happen. So here you are deliberately allowing without question someone to stick something in you and you have no idea where it came from, what is in it, or anything. It literally is a witch's brew, by the way, but you're allowing it in you and then wondering why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And this is to all those who have received these things. You can kiss your dream state, your true unadulterated dream state so long.
Because something else is in there with you, in your body with you.
The way you put it is very sobering and scary, but if that helps, great. But yeah, that's literally a fact. Something is in there with you. You're going to have to do a lot to get it out of you. That's the other thing to keep in mind. Don't let anybody or anything tell you that you cannot reverse certain things. Certain things can be undone. Most things can be undone. And there will be residual effects. You're going to have to live with the residual. But many things can be undone. It's are you willing to go that route, that deep, that far?
I remember you were telling me that. Yeah, I know it's extensive. I mean, I remember you were telling me that like even if somebody in your family got it, that you'd be smart to do something like a Abramelin ritual where you can, because if you're gonna have children, and if they've been like if they've had this thing grafted to them via the needle, then it's in them metaphysically too.
Right. That was one of the reasons why, for the most part, and especially on the East Coast, they were jabbing certain family members primarily, because through them you could reach the rest. And I don't mean, mentally reach them through a pep talk. I mean, through the bloodline, you could actually etherically or so-called metaphysically reach the rest. There's always in every family, there's always a pivotal member that is a soul connection through all of the members. You can tell that family member, and that's the one that usually is targeted for whatever inoculations, you name it. You hit that target member. Sometimes you can bring down an entire household. You can bring down an entire family, cause strife, whatever. So yeah, if you inoculate the right family member, you can hit everyone. No different than, it's like backtracking or backmasking or reverse engineering. If I can trace you, then I can taint you. Same means. If I can trace your lineage in certain ways, if I can break down your so-called genome, I could also do other things too.
So
So don't
it's
play
more
around with
it's about it's about breaking down the template, right? Like, because the more that they can break down the template, then the more that you regenerate from a broken template where things are just not even installed anymore. Like, you look at like the Kabbalah, for example. The Kabbalah is missing spheres, and then you look at like the further you go back, then you just get more spheres, and then the further you go back, you can see that there's more geometry to the picture. But if you get people just sold on Kabbalah, then they'll never know. If they think that that's all that exists, then they'll never know. It's kind of like you said, like if people don't, if they're not in touch with their dreams, then their identity is just going to be limited to whatever their identity is. Like I know I'm a plumber or whatever it is. I'm just this, I'm that. If you got the jab, and you have no access to your dreams, and your template's just being broken down generation after generation, then you don't even know what you're missing.
Well, that's why I said it's very important not to just take on anything, especially something that's going to breach your natural borders and without question. Question, research, reading. Everyone should have done that. I don't care. Nothing is so egregious that, there's only one way to fix it, and that's what everyone who took it fell for. And even those who didn't fall for it, those who, kind of talked others into it or supported it, same thing. And mind you, I'm still of the school of thought that says not everybody is what we think they are who are promoting all these things. So, just be wise. You don't take on anything like that. No more than, I said it to someone, a woman had contacted me. I think I might have read her email on a podisode, and she contacted me eventually by phone. I'm not going to mention any names with respect and privacy, but I said to her, would you allow any male on the street to impregnate you? Just, any random male, Skid Row, wherever, just randomly impregnate you. She said, of course not, no. And I said, well, why did you let some nurse, female, whatever doctor, because she said her nurse, her doctor's female doctor, she, like this, some special thing. I said, it doesn't matter, male, female. I said, why did you let them stick you with something? She said, well, because she couldn't really give me an answer, but it boiled down to, I thought it would help. In that answer, there's no thought.
No, no, there's not true investigation of self there. It, you know,
No, if
yeah,
you actually took just a little bit of time to realize these things, and again, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, you are obligated to know you. I won't say know thyself, but yeah, that too. But you are obligated to know your functions, how you operate. Some people
so
know their
like,
cars more than they know themselves, but you are obligated to know whatever you put to the task. You are obligated to know, even if it is a car, you should know at least the basics of, how to repair it if it stops and what you're looking at when it breaks down, so you can talk to an expert and not be standing like an idiot or being misused when they tell you, okay, we got to get this part and it costs this much. You know exactly what's what because you've done a lot of reading and research. You're operating it. You're responsible for it. You should know exactly what you're doing with what's in your household, what comes through your household, everything. What your car, you should know about it, not just how to change a tire. And many people don't know how to do that either. If you don't know how to have a car, maintain a car, and what the car is made of, and how to put it together, or how to talk to an expert about it, and what they're talking about when they talk to you, then don't have a car. Take a bus.
so, like these things, like as far as the needle, that's just like one of many needles that people have been subjected to in their lifetime. For a lot of the people, especially I mean, not even just in the West, but all over. But um, I just wanted to say, like, circumcision has to have a generational effect as well. Like, I would assume that cutting off the most sensitive part of the male body has got to, uh,
Without anesthesia, by the way.
yeah.
Do
And then
you know
at
the
that
reason
time,
for that? Do you know the reason for that?
to
Just look up.
create the trial.
Well, a few moons ago, I did a podisode on that and went in depth onto why it was done without that. There are three reasons. One, when you torture, you release a chemical, a particular chemical. That chemical actually is spirit food, put it that way. And each time it's released, you increase the portal of a priest or rabbi, if you will, and they become powerful. So it could be a doctor, it could be a nurse, it could be anyone who's in that position who's around when that occurs. They have increased their portal, and that this particular portal, and I'm not going into it right now, we'll go into it another one, that this particular portal is used to take on so-called, I said so-called, demon energy. Because demons are controlled at will. It's a spirit form that you control. So you have to have the portal for it. And what increases the opening of that portal? A particular chemical that males have, primarily within the prepuce, and it's released during that particular. It's also released during orgasm if you have foreskin, but if there is none, it's not released. But it's released during the traumatic removal of that, which is a splaying. It's actually splayed. It's cut and splayed, which is the most egregious pain. If you want to talk about pain or searing pain, it causes a searing pain. And there's no local anesthetic applied. And that's the reason. So if you look back to one of the biggest priests behind it, his last name is Kellogg. The name sounds familiar. It should. It's associated with cereal because he started out of Battle Creek, Michigan, which is a high witch area, mainly male witches. And the purpose of the grain, the eating of the grain, was to make a subservient male, especially for purposes of war and soldiers. And right before that time frame, they needed a lot of fodder for the growth of the uh, the infiltrated Americas. So they needed a lot of male fodder. And in his writings, because at that time there was a lot of Protestant and Christian tenets about masturbation, and he said that the cutting and its residual effect would create an instant pain each time the male attempted to masturbate, and it would cause a reflection of the act, and it would be a lifelong reflection. This is from, you can read it in his writings. These are parasites. And so there was a nurse that wrote an entire treatise on this act, saying, you know, circumcision is the one cure looking for a disease, I think is how she phrased it. But it's a vestige of the goddess worship that came from many moons ago. Groups that worship goddesses usually sacrifice males, and one of the things that they sacrificed was the regenerative organs, or, you know, the so-called sacrificial area, which is the prepuce, which they claim belongs to the mother, and therefore to give it back to her. And you would give it back to her by, some groups would cut it off and she would eat it, like the placenta. Other groups, they would cut it off and bury it under the threshold of her door, or wherever, you know, hut, something like that. And these are all troglodyte mentalities and ways, but it all boils down to control of populations through manipulation and belief systems. And so you see it continuing today, and circumcision is just a form of earmarking. Like, you know, you have an accounting, you earmark a male, you earmark something used for a particular purpose in a society. You snip a dog because when you snip it, it has different value. And that's why a lot of groups around the world, like if you go to many so-called Latin countries, a lot of males, not a lot, but quite a few, want to get circumcised because it's seen as, you know, not just cleanliness, but a higher level in society. You know, the foreskin, especially if you go back a few decades ago, it's considered dirty and low class, peon, subservient. And if you were clean, scholarly, then it was cut off. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I figured it has to contribute to hypersexuality, because people are not even really experiencing sex the way they would. There's no sensitivity like it would be, and I feel like
There's a language between the penile heading of the penis and inside of the vaginal walls. It's actually electrical, and you have to maintain that electrical. You know, everything about you has an electrical aspect to it. But if you start cutting things off, you're going to either get phantom sensations like an amputee, and no communication whatsoever, and that can cause issues too. But with or without the foreskin or the prepuce, you are still able to spread forth the light, but you still have to nurture your sperm. Should it still occur, the infant genital mutilation? No, because no one's questioning, and they're all going. You ask anyone who's so-called Jew, or so-called, or Jewish rather, or so-called Hebrew Israelite or Muslim, they will fight you tooth and nail about it, not realizing that they are puppets in this rite, in this ritual. But it's primarily, you know, like most things, it has not only a commercial function. Remember I said earmarked? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Most creams and lotions, anti-aging creams, anti-cancer, so-called anti-cancer medicines, interferon, you name it. The list goes on and on and on and on. Medications, synthetics are made from foreskins.
Yeah, I've heard that that they use it for a bunch of cosmetic reasons. But I mean,
Mhm.
I figure that the trauma that's created separates the being from its body, and yeah, I guess that's what allows the space for the demon programming to or program to get injected. And
Well, here, let me explain that better. When you traumatize the actual infant, what occurs is you basically blind them, and so they become, when someone's blinded, what happens when you, if you cannot see, you need someone to lead you, and therefore you create within that individual, that male energy, you create this need for an authority. And that's why I said before, it makes the perfect soldier. The thing with the so-called demon, and I don't use that word a lot because it's misused, the portal is for the person performing the act. They want that portal opened. It's think of it like a piercing. They want that hole, that opening in them to be perfect so that they can fit whatever kind of thing goes in there. I'm using that as not a metaphor, but to give you a visual. The spirit energy that they want is within that portal. And the more you get, the more you can control spirit energies. What you see in movies as demonic control. Demons are not what you have been told or indoctrinated to believe. They are controlled. They listen to their summoners. And you might have seen some books or read some books or seen movies or films on that where someone snuck it in there. That is actual fact. A so-called demon is under the control of those who summon them, and they have to maintain that control, because out of control it will attack them. But the portal within these beings, whether it's a priest, high priest, so-called rabbi, becomes like I liken it to a piercing, an earring piercing. It has to be the perfect hole or receptacle for this spirit energy. And the better the receptacle, the more powerful that person is. And if you notice in certain sects and group sects, SECTS, you'll notice that they pay high tribute and reverence to certain members of their religious orders. No different than in Catholicism, where, kissing rings and bowing down and all that stuff. This is not just pomp and circumstance. These people hold special spiritual places.
yeah, that's what I was gonna give. I was getting ready to say that like so the trauma creates the amnesia to where the baby is going to be more separate from itself and have this demon controlling it that's being controlled. And so then there's going to be
No,
separation between lifetimes in a sense or between
not at
bodies.
all. No, anytime you have trauma, it's not about, that's why I said I didn't want to use the word demon. I didn't want to confuse you or anyone else. So I use that word very lightly. This has nothing really to do with that at all, but to do with what is called spirit force, or you can think of it like an app, okay? Because basically it's kind of the same thing. And what it leaves within the traumatized infant is a hole. Um, and that hole is always a void that can never be filled. Like the pith, of a plant. It's always going to be soft and spongy. It will never be able to be firm. It will always be undeveloped and underdeveloped, or under mature. And that pith is in the right spot. That so-called void is in the right spot. Where is it? It's located in the pituitary. And it is then filled in with calcium. This happens naturally when, for example, someone is given electroshock therapy over and over and over again within a rapid amount of time. They develop this calcium, high amounts of calcium deposits in basically filling in the blanks in the brain where all the glial cells have been burnt out. And this occurs within the traumatized baby. But you cannot detect it if you were to take a brain scan. Everything would look fine, but actually it's not. You look at it closely, you'll see what I mean. And typically, these types of children always male, obviously, make the best soldiers or gang members or cops or whatever that follows a lead without question.
Just some kind of fodder.
Right. So you're getting the picture, hence the reason why you have a country that's considered the so-called police dog of the world, and which is where you get most of your foreskins from.
So, but I mean, that's like it's like the same thing, like with the doctor that's doing it, because they're just a husk host, basically, right? Because they probably had it done to them, and they don't even know that they're just being
Well,
used
now
by
you're
some
getting into
entity.
the now we get into the so-called now you get into the esoterics of legality and proprietary use of implements. Look up each implement that is used on these rites, these practices, these procedures. Each implement is proprietary, it's patented, and each time it's used, it sends back to its owner all the things that I just mentioned. You know, there are various types of clamps, and look at the owners of these clamps and look up the patents. Who owns these? They're all pretty much owned by rabbinical groups or particular families.
And these are just pretty much. I mean, these are hosts, but like it's a
These are actual
it's a
clamps.
blood.
These are actually medical devices. They're in hospitals. Go look them up. I'm not
I mean,
kidding. Every hospital has to use these clamps,
but I
unless
mean,
you know
like the
unless you get it performed in a temple by a moil, and then of course they bite it off and suck out the blood.
that's what I was saying, like, because you just said like rabbinical, and I was just saying like it's a bloodline. Like these people are not like you call them Jewish. They're not like as far as like the way Judaism was. It used to be that you would go from the father's bloodline, right? It used to be like that, but then at some point, the Judaism that people know today, they switched to the mother's determinant. If your mother's a Jew, then you're a Jew, and
Hmm.
so that had to be like some big divide there. And I'm assuming that's like kind of the same thing with Catholicism because it seems to be the same groups, just Edomites and
It is.
Canaanites. Like the Edomites took over the Judaism or Hebrewism, and
Well, there
the
was no takeover.
Canaanites.
You just when things split and go in this faction, there's no takeover. It's just a little split here, a little split there, but they're all Pushan worshippers, or they all worship goddesses, and you don't realize that unless you actually look and see, and you see that. I say that if you look at a bottle of St. Pauli beer, you're looking at the epitome of all these religions. You've got the crescent, you've got the stars, you've got the virgin, all in one.
It's kind of like it's the same thing with a lot of the alcohols. They all got some type of messaging or coat of arms on them that's
Yeah.
signaling something.
Hence the reason, be careful what you put in you, be wise. If you want to boil it down to just that message alone, be wise in what you are bringing into you. Don't violate yourself. And question, 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 be wise and observe. And then start taking action by edifying your brain and repeating this message again. And then take the next steps to start bringing your community into fruition, and do it wisely and do it correctly. Step out of you're going to have you've been put into paperwork, what you call witchcraft. You're going to have to come out of it through paperwork. Get your birth, so-called birth, rescinded. You were begot, you weren't born, you're not abandoned, you are a living soul. Change all that, get that changed. Every member of your community has to have that done. You want to call a circumcision, circumcise yourself out of the paperwork. That's the real circumcision in that regard. And then set up your protections within the empire. And I mentioned that before. You want to know about it, replay it, and you'll hear it again and what you have to do on that. Might touch upon it in the later one. And I think the plate is full for everyone. It's beyond full for this first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess that's a good way to sum it up there.
Hmm.
That yeah. I mean,
And
I
you're
don't know how often
indoors.
you do these, huh?
I said, and you're indoors. Okay.
Yeah, the sun, yeah, the elements now are working against me.
Okay. All right, then we'll lock up and be wise and secure. Um, and I say, as my people say, haya haya, and um, be wise and respectful of originator creator, and be wise and respectful of yourself. Be patient with those who you consider your ones you care for and trust. Be patient with them, and be patient with yourself as you learn and realize the things that you have to change about yourself, both strengths and flaws, because sometimes those strengths are illusions. So be patient with yourself, and at the same time diligent, disciplined, and determined. That's all.
Yeah, and then thank you everybody for listening or watching, and whenever you do listen and watch this, and uh, check out Pharoh's Patreon and follow at Pharoh's House on Instagram. Go to facebook.com/Pharoh's House and you connect with Pharoh directly. You can set up a consultation directly with Pharoh. And any questions that we haven't got to, I'm sure in due time we'll get to them. And I guess that's it for now.
Okay, and then well, by the way, if anyone has a request for a book of information, I'll see if I can find it. My spare time, I'll research and see if it is possible, if it has been digitized, I'll look for it. And at the same token, if you know of a book that you have a resource base of books, please feel free to share that with others through the website. So, you can also do that. Just contact me and I'll set you up so you can upload the book and others can access it in the free library. So also same thing. If you know of books that are helpful, books on surviving, books on building, books on math for people who have math problems, who are fearful of math, books on English language, whatever, any language that is useful, you name it. Anything that we have talked about tonight, if you have books on that or know where I can get them and I can download them, you can connect and contact me on that.
So when this is over, I guess it's gonna ask you if you want to post it to your Instagram. You should post it to your Instagram, and then I can grab a copy of it. I can post it
Okay.
on YouTube.
Is it too big to put on there? I don't know how this works.
Now it'll post. It'll be considered alive, and like, I think you'll be able to save the file as well. Like soon as it ends, it'll ask you like, do you want to save this file? I'm pretty
Okay.
sure, every time, and then you can choose to post it. It might go under the Reels section, but it should go up.
Okay. All right. And no offense meant. If anyone was offended, well, those are emotions. You'll heal. That's all I have to say about emotions. You'll heal. You'll get better. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
truly.
I appreciate that information you gave me. I didn't know that. Okay. I'll talk to you soon. Maybe we'll do it this week coming because people are literally taking notes and actually making physical moves, then yeah, maybe we need to do this next week as well.
Yeah, I think it's effective. I really do feel like it sinks in better. Um, when people can really just listen to you talk and listen on this platform. I know a lot of the people that follow me actively are on this platform. So,
Okay.
because like if I post something on YouTube, people might get around to it. If I post something on Facebook, the algorithms can push me all over the place. But Instagram is a lot more direct.
Okay, then I'll do this one here. I don't use. I've put things on YouTube, not for purpose of numbers or anything like that, but just to get people to learn and know. But I don't think a lot of folks know about the channel on YouTube, and it doesn't matter if they don't. it's there if you want to check out some of the things there, but you can also go to the website and listen to those podasodes there. They're not as long as what you see here on Instagram because I don't have the space for it, but you can learn a little bit in 30 minutes. You can learn a lot in 30 minutes, but just be warned, podasodes are not long like this. They're just short, 30 minutes, and take notes when you hear them. You don't have to be on Patreon. It's just there. I use it for temporary purposes. And my articles, they are on a blog. I don't think anybody knows about that, but I'll be putting my articles on there. And if I can, I might post a link on Instagram. So for those who don't know about the blog, you can go read the articles if you like reading. That's all.
Yeah, definitely check out those podosodes if you get a chance. Everybody here, I mean, it's a wealth of information in those.
Thanks. All right, then. Talk to you very
All right,
soon.
all right then, Pharoh. Talk to you.
All right. How do you click stop? I don't know how to. Okay. It didn't ask me to save, so let's see. I'm still live. Oh boy. Hmm. Okay. I don't want to touch the wrong thing. Okay. Click X. Are you sure you want to? Yes.